A single gunshot echoes across the valley as dawn breaks over Golden Creek. The mining settlement stirs awake not to the familiar sounds of pickaxes and sluice gates, but to the sight of a body hanging from the mine entrance. A message carved in blood above it: justice comes for all. Some secrets can be buried for 20 years beneath new lives and fresh-turned soil. Some betrayals can hide behind honorable faces and respected names. But the reckoning always arrives carried on horseback by 40 armed men with vengeance in their hearts and a list of the damned in their saddlebags. When war's echoes finally reach this hidden corner of the frontier, old wounds will bleed fresh. Fathers and daughters, former friends turned bitter enemies will face a final judgment where truth becomes both weapon and salvation. In a land built by those running from their past, no one outruns their conscience forever. Golden Creek lay nestled between jagged mountains like a secret the West had tried to keep. The settlement wasn't on most maps, just a collection of wooden structures clinging to the hillside following the meandering path of the creek that had given the place its name. Water that once ran clear now carried silt and the crushed hopes of men who came seeking fortune, but found something else entirely a chance to disappear. William "Bill" Reynolds stood at the edge of the mining camp, watching the sun sink behind the western ridge. His weathered hands gripped the worn fence post knuckles white against splintered wood. 58 years had carved deep lines into his face, each wrinkle a chapter of a story he'd never fully told. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, despite his age, scanned the horizon with the practiced vigilance of a man who'd spent too many nights in trenches, expecting death with every flare. The war had been over for 15 years, but not for Bill. Never for Bill. "Pa, you planning to watch that sunset till morning comes?" Sarah Reynolds approached from behind her boots crunching on the rocky path. At 25, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that reminded Bill of her mother. The same chestnut hair, same determined chin, but her eyes were his. Sarah had been born in this camp, had never known the world before. Sometimes Bill envied her for that. "Just thinking," he said, not turning. "You do too much of that lately." Sarah came to stand beside him, resting her elbows on the fence. The medical bag she carried everywhere hung at her side, a constant reminder of her role as the camp's closest thing to a doctor. "Chen was asking for you. Said something about the new explosives arriving?" Bill nodded. Michael Chen was one of the few men he trusted completely in Golden Creek. The Chinese engineer had arrived 5 years ago, bringing with him knowledge of modern mining techniques that had saved the camp from abandonment. But Chen knew more than just how to safely blast through rock. He knew how to keep secrets. "I'll find him," Bill said finally, turning away from the sunset. "Any trouble in camp today?" Sarah's face clouded briefly. "Martinez's boy has fever again. And there was another argument between Jackson and Williams about water rights." She paused. "And the Peterson twins swear they saw riders watching the camp from the North Ridge." Bill's posture stiffened. "Riders? How many riders?" "Just two, according to them. Probably nothing. You know how those boys exaggerate." Bill wasn't convinced. Golden Creek had been peaceful for years, but peace in the West was as fragile as a bird's egg. He'd learned that lesson too many times. "Tell Chen I'll meet him at the storehouse," Bill said, already walking toward the center of camp. Sarah watched him go, concern etching her features. Her father had been increasingly restless these past weeks, checking the perimeter, inspecting the rifles kept in the meeting house, sending riders to patrol the outlying areas. He wouldn't tell her why, but Sarah had lived with Bill Reynolds long enough to know when something was wrong. As darkness fell over Golden Creek, lamps flickered to life in cabin windows. From the saloon came the muted sounds of a harmonica and men's laughter. A dog barked somewhere near the stables. Normal sounds. Peaceful sounds. None of them knew what morning would bring. Dawn broke over Golden Creek with the crackle of gunfire. 3 shots, sharp and close, jerked Bill from a fitful sleep. He was on his feet before the echo faded, Remington and hand boots already stomping into place. Outside, voices called in alarm. A woman screamed. Bill burst through his cabin door to see people emerging from their homes, confusion painted across sleep-heavy faces. Samuel Winters, a former sharpshooter with eyes that missed nothing, was already racing toward the mine entrance, rifle in hand. "Reynolds," Samuel called. "Main shaft." Bill fell in beside him, the two men moving with the coordinated precision of soldiers who'd shared battlefields. They didn't speak again as they sprinted up the rocky path toward the mine entrance, where a small crowd had already gathered. They were looking up. Against the pale morning sky, a dark shape swayed from the wooden frame of the mine entrance, a body hanging from a noose fashioned from mining rope. Below it, men stood in shocked silence, hats removed. Bill pushed through the crowd, heart hammering against his ribs. The dead man's face was turned away, but Bill recognized the patched coat, the worn boots. Isaiah Washington, one of the few black veterans who'd helped found Golden Creek. Samuel cursed softly beside him. "Who would cut him down?" Bill ordered, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. "Now!" Two miners scrambled to obey, climbing the wooden frame. Bill stepped closer, studying the ground beneath the hanging man. No signs of struggle, no footprints other than those of the gathering crowd. This had happened during the night while the camp slept. As the body was lowered, Bill noticed something tucked into Washington's coat pocket, a folded paper yellowed with age. He reached for it, then hesitated, suddenly aware of the eyes watching him. "Everyone back to work," he commanded. "Sarah, I need you here." The crowd reluctantly dispersed as Sarah hurried forward, her medical bag clutched tightly. Her face paled at the sight of Washington's body now laid on the ground, but her hands remained steady as she knelt beside him. "He's been dead for hours," she said quietly, examining the ligature marks. "This wasn't suicide, Pa. Look at his hands." Bill looked. Washington's wrists showed rope burns. He'd been bound before being hanged. And now in the growing daylight, Bill could see something else, words carved into the wooden beam directly above where the body had hung. "Justice comes for all." With the crowd gone, Bill carefully removed the paper from Washington's pocket. It was a military document, one he recognized immediately. His blood turned to ice water in his veins. It was a fire mission order from 1863. At the top in faded ink, W. Reynolds. Target confirmation, 14th Regiment colored. Bill's hands began to shake. He quickly folded the paper and shoved it into his own pocket before anyone could see. "Pa!" Sarah was watching him, eyes sharp with concern. "Get him to your clinic." Bill said, his voice rough. "Treat him with respect. He was a good man." "What about the sheriff in Riverton?" "I'll send someone, but the sheriff won't come. Not for this." And as Sarah organized the removal of Washington's body, Bill turned to Samuel, who had remained silently watching the proceedings. "I need you to gather the founders. Meeting in 1 hour. My cabin." Samuel nodded, his dark eyes searching Bill's face. "This isn't random, is it?" Bill looked back at the words carved into the beam. "No, it's a message." "For who?" Bill didn't answer. He was already walking away, his mind racing backward through time to smoke-filled battlefields and decisions made in the chaos of war. Decisions that had followed him apparently all the way to this remote corner of the West. The black iron box hidden beneath the floorboards of his cabin suddenly felt like it was calling to him, its contents burning through wood and earth. Michael Chen was waiting when Bill returned to his cabin. The Chinese engineer stood on the porch, arms crossed over his chest, expression grim. At 40, Chen carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had survived both the hardships of immigration and the violent prejudice of the West. His expertise with explosives had made him invaluable to the mining operation, but it was his unwavering loyalty that had earned Bill's trust. "I heard about Washington," Chen said as Bill approached. Bill nodded, unlocking his cabin door and gesturing Chen inside. "Did you see anything unusual last night? Any strangers near camp?" Chen shook his head. "Nothing, but I've been working late at the new shaft. I didn't return until after midnight." Once inside, Bill closed the door and moved to the stone fireplace. He knelt, pushing aside the worn rug to reveal a loose floorboard. Chen watched silently as Bill pried it up and reached into the dark space beneath, extracting a small black iron box. The box had no lock, only a simple metal clasp that had remained closed for nearly 2 decades. Bill placed it on the table between them, his hand resting on the lid as if reluctant to reveal its contents. "You're the only one who knows about this," Bill said quietly. Chen nodded. "You never told me what's inside." "Because I hope to never open it again." Bill's weathered fingers worked the clasp. "But someone else knows. Someone who shouldn't." The lid creaked as it opened. Inside lay a stack of yellowed papers, a tarnished metal, and a small leather-bound journal. Bill carefully lifted out the journal, its pages swollen with age and handling. Beneath it was a folded letter, the paper thin and delicate. "What is all this?" Chen asked. "My sins," Bill replied, unfolding the letter with careful fingers. "During the war, I was an artillery sergeant. They called me Deadeye Bill because I never missed a target." His voice grew distant. "Except once." The letter trembled slightly in his hands. "This is from Ezekiel Harlow. He was a chaplain with the 14th Colored Regiment. And my friend." Chen's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "The same regiment mentioned in the document found on Washington." Bill looked up surprised. "How did you—" "I was behind you at the mine. I saw the paper." Bill nodded grimly. "In '63, near Charleston, my battery received orders to shell a Confederate position. We were told it had been taken over by rebel forces, but it wasn't rebels in that camp." His voice dropped to nearly a whisper. "It was the 14th. My shells killed 47 men, black Union soldiers." Chen remained silent, allowing Bill to continue. "Harlow survived. He wrote to me from a military prison where they'd sent him after he tried to expose what happened. Said I was the only one who could clear his name by telling the truth." Bill's hand clenched around the letter. "I never replied, never testified. I was a coward. And now someone wants to expose this secret," Chen concluded. "Not just expose it, punish me for it." Bill returned the letter to the box. "Washington didn't die because of anything he did. He died because of what I didn't do." A knock at the door interrupted them. Bill quickly closed the box, sliding it beneath the table, as Samuel's voice called from outside. "Reynolds, they're here." Bill exchanged a look with Chen. "Tell no one about this, not even Sarah." Chen nodded solemnly. "Your secret dies with me." But as Bill moved to the door, Chen added softly, "Though I fear others already know." The founders of Golden Creek gathered in Bill's cabin, their faces grave in the amber lamplight. There were 5 of them now, the last remaining of the original 10, who had staked claims in this valley nearly 16 years before. Maria Hernandez sat closest to the fire, her black widow's clothing stark against the warm glow. At 50, her face remained handsome, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Few in camp knew she had once been an informant for the Union infiltrating Confederate households in her native Texas. Beside her sat James Cooper, a former Union cavalry officer whose left arm ended at the elbow, a permanent reminder of Antietam. His weathered face was permanently set in a scowl, but those who knew him recognized the fairness that guided his judgments. Samuel Winters leaned against the wall, arms crossed his lean frame, coiled with the perpetual readiness of a man who had spent years behind a rifle scope. The youngest of the founders at 45, he rarely spoke of his time as a sharpshooter, but the nightmares that woke him, screaming, spoke volumes. Michael Chen completed the circle, sitting slightly apart, a position he had grown accustomed to as the only non-veteran among them and the only Asian face in the leadership of Golden Creek. Bill stood before the stone fireplace, his shadow stretching long across the wooden floor. "Isaiah Washington was murdered last night." He began without preamble. "Hanged from the mine entrance as a message." "A message to who?" Cooper demanded, leaning forward. Bill's gaze swept across the room. "To me, and possibly to all of us." He explained what they had found, the carved words, the military document, carefully omitting his personal connection to the 14th Regiment. As he spoke, he watched their reactions, wondering if any of them already knew what was in the black box now hidden beneath his table. "This wasn't random," Maria said when he finished. Her Spanish accent had faded over the years, but it still colored her English, especially when she was upset. "Whoever did this knows about our pasts. Could be anyone with a grudge against former Union soldiers," Cooper suggested. "God knows there are plenty who still can't accept they lost." Samuel pushed away from the wall. "No, this is too specific. The timing, the document. Someone's been planning this." The question is why now," Chen interjected. "After all these years." Bill was about to respond when another knock came at the door, 3 rapid taps followed by 2 slower ones. Sarah's knock. He opened the door to find his daughter standing there, her face ashen. "Riders," she said breathlessly. "At least 40 coming up from the South Road. Armed." The founders were on their feet instantly. "Raiders?" Cooper asked, already reaching for his rifle. "Too organized for raiders," Samuel said, peering through the window. "Too well equipped." Bill stepped onto the porch, the others following. In the distance, a cloud of dust rose from the valley floor. Through his field glasses, Bill could make out the line of horsemen approaching, men in dark clothing, riding in formation, rifles gleaming in the midday sun. At their center, a wagon carried what appeared to be a Gatling gun. "My God," breathed Cooper. "It's an army." "Get everyone into the mine tunnels," Bill ordered. "Women, children, anyone who can't fight. Samuel, organize the men who can. Cooper, check our ammunition stores. Maria, make sure the clinic is ready for casualties." As they scattered to their tasks, Sarah caught her father's arm. "Pa, what's happening? Who are these people?" Bill stared at the approaching force, a cold certainty settling in his gut. "The past," he said grimly. "It's finally caught up with us." In the black iron box beneath his table, Ezekiel Harlow's letter seemed to pulse like a living thing, a ticking clock that had finally run down. The riders halted just beyond rifle range of Golden Creek, in their formation spreading across the valley floor in a dark, menacing line. Through his field glasses, Bill studied the men at their center, tall and broad-shouldered with a shock of white hair beneath a black hat. He sat his horse with the easy confidence of a born cavalryman, surveying the mining camp with calculating eyes. "Silas Blackwood," Samuel muttered beside him, peering through his own glasses. "I'd know that bastard anywhere." Bill lowered his glasses. "You know him. Fought against him at Shiloh. He was Confederate cavalry, then turned mercenary after the war. Heard he was running guns down in Mexico." Samuel's expression darkened. "He's not the type to lead an ordinary raiding party." "No," Bill agreed. "This is something else." They had positioned themselves on the rocky outcrop that served as Golden Creek's natural watchtower. Below, the camp bustled with activity as people prepared for what was coming. Men checked weapons and reinforced barricades, while women and children disappeared into the relative safety of the mine tunnels. The air hummed with tension. "What do they want?" Sarah asked. She had refused to join the other non-combatants, insisting her medical skills would be needed. Bill didn't answer. In his heart, he already knew. A lone rider, separated from the line, approaching slowly, with a white flag raised. As he drew closer, Bill could see he was younger than the others, barely 20, with a smooth face and nervous eyes. "Message from Mr. Blackwood," the young man called when he was within earshot. His accent was pure Mississippi Delta. "For William Reynolds." Bill stepped forward. "I'm Reynolds." The messenger reached into his coat and produced a sealed envelope. "Mr. Blackwood says to tell you he's here on behalf of someone you once knew. Says you have 1 hour to consider his terms before we come in and take what we want." Bill accepted the envelope, its paper heavy in his hand. "And what exactly does Blackwood want?" The young man's eyes flicked nervously between Bill and the armed miners now gathering behind him. "That's all in the letter, sir. But," he hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "he didn't come all this way for gold." With that, the messenger wheeled his horse around and galloped back to Blackwood's line. "Well," Cooper demanded as Bill broke the seal, "what does it say?" Bill unfolded the letter, its contents confirming his worst fears. "Reynolds, after 20 years, justice finds you. I have no personal quarrel with the people of Golden Creek, but I am authorized to use whatever force necessary to secure 2 items. 1. The black iron box containing your war documents and correspondence. 2. You alive to stand witness. Surrender these willingly, and your camp will be spared. Resist, and your people will share the fate of those you once sacrificed. 1 hour, Silas Blackwood." Acting on behalf of E.H. Bill's blood ran cold at the initials. E.H. Ezekiel Harlow, the man whose letter lay in that black box, the man Bill had betrayed with his silence. "What's it say, Pa?" Sarah asked, trying to read over his shoulder. Bill folded the letter before she could see. "They want me," he said simply, "and something I possess." "Well, they can't have either," Cooper declared, his remaining hand tightening on his rifle. "It's not that simple," Bill replied. "This isn't about robbery, it's about the war." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "What aren't you telling us, Bill?" Before Bill could answer, Maria rushed up the path toward them, her normally composed face tense with alarm. "Bill Chen says there's movement on the North Ridge," she reported breathlessly. "More riders circling around behind us." "They're surrounding the camp," Samuel realized. "Cutting off escape routes." Bill looked out at Blackwood's force, then back at the frightened faces of his people. Golden Creek had survived drought, disease, and the ordinary violence of the frontier. But this was different. This was his past coming to collect a debt, and innocent people would pay the price unless he acted. Get everyone into the main tunnel, he decided. We'll hold them off from there if they attack. Idiot, and if they don't, Sarah asked. If they just wait us out. Bill's gaze moved to the horizon where storm clouds were gathering. We have food and water for 2 weeks. They don't, and rain's coming. As the others hurried to organize the retreat into the mine, Sarah lingered beside her father. You're not telling me everything, she said quietly. This is about that box you keep hidden, isn't it? The one you think I don't know about. Bill turned to his daughter, surprised. How did you... I'm not blind, Pa. I've seen you checking it at night when you think I'm asleep. Her eyes, so like his own, searched his face. Whatever's in there, whatever you did during the war, it can't be worth all these lives. For a moment, Bill considered telling her everything about the misdirected artillery fire, the dead soldiers, Ezekiel Harlow's imprisonment. But the words stuck in his throat as they had for 20 years. Some sins follow you, Sarah, he said finally. No matter how far you run. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Golden Creek's residents filed into the main mine tunnel. The passage was 15 feet wide at its entrance, narrowing as it burrowed deeper into the mountain, large enough to shelter everyone, with multiple branching tunnels offering both ventilation and potential escape routes if the worst happened. Bill supervised the evacuation, counting heads as people entered, with whatever supplies they could carry. Lanterns illuminated frightened faces, and children clung to their mothers' skirts. The veterans moved with practiced efficiency, positioning themselves near the entrance, weapons ready. Michael Chen approached carrying a wooden crate that clinked with the sound of glass bottles. Blasting oil, he explained quietly. If they charge the entrance, we can create a controlled cave-in. Not enough to trap us, but enough to slow them down. Bill nodded grimly. Set it up, but only as a last resort. As Chen moved deeper into the tunnel, Sarah emerged from the crowd, her medical supplies organized in a corner where the wounded could be treated. Her eyes met Bill's across the distance, questioning, demanding truths he wasn't ready to give. Outside, the hour was nearly up. Samuel appeared at his side, rifle cradled in his arms. Blackwood's men are moving into position. They've got that Gatling gun aimed right at the camp. And the North Ridge, at least 20 more up there. They're boxing us in professionally. Samuel spat on the ground. These aren't ordinary bandits, Bill. They're military, or were. Bill checked his pocket watch. 10 minutes left. You planning to give them what they want? Bill's hand unconsciously moved to his jacket pocket where the black box's key pressed against his chest like a burning coal. I don't know yet. A commotion near the tunnel entrance drew their attention. A man was pushing his way through the crowd. Jacob Williams, one of the younger miners, his face flushed with anger. Is it true? He demanded, confronting Bill. They're not here for gold. They're here for you. The tunnel fell silent, all eyes turning toward them. Bill felt the weight of those stares. People who had trusted him followed him, built lives under his protection. They want me, Bill acknowledged, his voice carrying in the stillness, and something I possess. Then give it to them, Williams shouted. My wife's about to have our first child. I'm not letting her die because of whatever you did in that damn war. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Fear was turning to anger, and anger needed a target. That's enough, Williams. Cooper stepped forward, his voice hard. Reynolds built this camp when you were still wet behind the ears. Show some respect. Respect? Williams laughed bitterly. There are 40 armed men out there ready to kill us all, and you want respect? Before Cooper could respond, a new voice cut through the tension, Maria's calm and authoritative. Fighting among ourselves is exactly what they want, she said, moving to stand beside Bill. We need to hear the whole story before we decide anything. All eyes returned to Bill. In that moment, he realized the truth could no longer stay buried. The black box's contents would be revealed one way or another, either by his choice or by force. 20 years ago, he began slowly. I made a mistake that cost the lives of 47 Union soldiers, black soldiers, men fighting for the same cause I was. A shocked silence fell over the tunnel. It was during the Charleston campaign. My artillery battery received orders to shell a position supposedly taken by Confederate forces. But our intelligence was wrong. Bill's voice grew hoarse. I fired on our own men, and when the mistake was discovered, I didn't speak up. I let others take the blame. Sarah pushed forward through the crowd, her face pale. Pa, one of those men was Ezekiel Harlow, a chaplain with the 14th Colored Regiment. He was court-martialed and imprisoned for 15 years for supposedly passing information to the enemy. Bill's eyes moved from face to face, seeing judgment, confusion, disappointment. The men outside, they're here on Harlow's behalf. The tunnel erupted in voices, some angry, some frightened, all demanding answers. Williams pointed an accusing finger. You've brought hell down on us because you were too cowardly to admit what you did. We all have pasts, Samuel interjected, stepping to Bill's side. Everyone in this camp came here running from something. Not something that's going to get us all killed, another voice shouted. As the argument intensified, a sharp whistle cut through the noise. Michael Chen stood at the tunnel entrance, his face grave. They're coming, he announced. All of them. Bill pushed past the angry crowd to join Chen at the entrance. Outside, Blackwood's force had formed into 3 columns, advancing slowly toward the camp. The Gatling gun had been mounted on a wagon at their center, its multiple barrels gleaming dully in the stormlight. Decision time had arrived. I'm going out there, Bill said quietly. Chen gripped his arm. That's suicide. So is staying here and fighting. They have us outgunned and surrounded. They'll kill you. Bill shook his head. No, Harlow wants me alive. He wants me to face what I did. And what about us? Sarah had approached silently, her voice tight with emotion. What happens to Golden Creek if you surrender? Bill turned to his daughter, seeing in her face all that he had tried to protect, all that he stood to lose. I don't know, he admitted, but I won't sacrifice more lives to hide from my past. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small brass key, pressing it into Sarah's palm. Under the floorboards in my cabin, the black box. If I don't come back, read what's inside. You'll understand then. Sarah's fingers closed around the key, her eyes filling with tears. There has to be another way. Pa! The shout came from one of the children near the tunnel entrance. They've taken someone! Bill rushed forward, pushing past miners crowding the opening. Through the gathering gloom, he could see Blackwood's force had halted its advance. 2 riders had broken from the main group, dragging someone between their horses. Samuel raised his field glasses. God almighty, he breathed. It's Mrs. Collins. Edith Collins, a widow who lived in the cabin closest to the valley road. She must have been caught before she could reach the mine. They're using her as a hostage, Cooper growled. Bastards! A voice boomed across the distance, amplified by a speaking trumpet. Reynolds, one final chance. Surrender yourself in the box or the woman dies first. Bill stepped out of the tunnel into the open air. Behind him, he heard Sarah's anguished cry, felt Chen's hand grasping for him, but he shook them off. Some debts could only be paid in person. I'm coming, he shouted back, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. Let her go. As Bill walked down the path toward Blackwood's men, the first heavy raindrops began to fall from the darkened sky. Behind him, Golden Creek waited in fragile safety. Before him, the shadows of his past had finally taken human form. Thunder cracked overhead, and the heavens opened. The rain fell in sheets, turning the dirt to mud beneath Bill's boots as he approached Blackwood's line. He walked steadily, hands raised, aware of dozens of rifle barrels tracking his movement. Water plastered his gray hair to his skull and ran in rivulets down his weathered face. Silas Blackwood sat his horse at the center of the line, seemingly unbothered by the downpour. Beside him, Mrs. Collins knelt in the mud, a burlap sack over her head, hands bound behind her back. Bill stopped 10 paces from Blackwood. I'm here, he called over the drumming rain. Let her go. Blackwood's face creased in a smile that never reached his eyes. The box, Reynolds. Where is it? Safe. Release the woman and I'll tell you. Blackwood studied him for a moment, then nodded to one of his men. The burlap sack was yanked from Mrs. Collins' head, revealing her terrified face. A knife severed her bonds and she stumbled to her feet. Go, Bill told her gently. Back to the mine. Mrs. Collins hesitated only briefly before gathering her mud-soaked skirts and running toward the camp. No shots followed her. Now, Blackwood said, the box. In my cabin, Bill replied, rain streaming down his face. Under the floorboard by the fireplace, Blackwood dispatched 3 riders toward the camp buildings. If they don't find it, or if your people open fire, I'll put a bullet in you myself. Bill said nothing, simply stood in the rain waiting. Minutes stretched like hours as Blackwood's men searched his cabin. Finally, they returned, one of them clutching the black iron box. "Found it, sir," the man reported, handing the box up to Blackwood. "Just where he said." Blackwood examined the box, then looked back at Bill with cold satisfaction. "Mount up, Reynolds. We have a long ride ahead." "Where are you taking me?" "To face judgment." Blackwood tucked the box into his saddlebag. "The kind you denied others." A horse was brought forward, Bill's own mount, taken from the camp stables. As he was helped into the saddle, his wrists bound to the pommel, Bill looked back toward Golden Creek one last time. Through the curtain of rain, he could just make out figures at the mine entrance, watching, waiting. Sarah would be among them. Sarah with the key, who would soon learn the full truth of her father's shame. "Move out!" "Nah, kunyam," Blackwood ordered, and the column began to withdraw, taking Bill with them. They had ridden less than half a mile when the crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley. One of Blackwood's men jerked in his saddle, then toppled to the ground. "Ambush!" someone shouted. More shots rang out, precise, methodical, each finding a target among Blackwood's forces. Men fell from their horses as bullets found them with uncanny accuracy. Samuel. It had to be. No one else in Golden Creek could make those shots, especially in this weather. Blackwood's men returned fire, shooting blindly at the rocky ridges where the shots originated. The Gatling gun swiveled its operator, cranking the handle, sending a spray of bullets into the rocks. In the confusion, Bill felt something press against his bound wrists, the cold edge of a knife. He twisted in the saddle to see Michael Chen crouch low behind him, having somehow infiltrated the chaos. "When I cut you free, be ready to run," Chen whispered, sawing at the ropes. "You shouldn't have come," Bill hissed. "Get back to the camp." "Too late for that." The ropes parted. "Go now." Bill slid from the saddle just as Blackwood turned, spotting the escape attempt. The mercenary leader drew his revolver, but before he could fire, another shot cracked from the ridge, sending his weapon spinning from his hand. "Kill them!" Blackwood roared, clutching his bleeding hand. Bill and Chen sprinted through the mud, bullets kicking up earth around them. The rain had become a blessing, obscuring their escape. Behind them, the firefight intensified as more shots came from the ridge. Samuel was not alone up there. They had nearly reached the shelter of a boulder outcropping when Chen stumbled, pitching forward into the mud. Bill skidded to a halt, turning back. "Go!" Chen gasped, struggling to rise. "I'm hit." A dark stain was spreading across Chen's left thigh. Bill grabbed him under the arms, dragging him behind the boulders as bullets whined off stone around them. "I'm not leaving you," Bill growled, tearing a strip from his own shirt to bind the wound. Chen's face was pale beneath the rain and mud. "The box," he managed. "Did you get it?" Bill shook his head grimly. "Blackwood still has it." Then this was for nothing. "No." Bill tightened the makeshift bandage. "It bought us time, and it showed me something important." "What's that?" Chen winced as Bill secured the knot. "That I've been a fool for 20 years. Bill peered around the boulder. The gunfire had slackened as Blackwood's forces regrouped. Hiding the truth didn't protect anyone. It just delayed the reckoning. A shout came from the direction of Golden Creek. More of the camp's defenders were moving into position along the ridgeline, providing covering fire. Under this protection, Bill helped Chen to his feet, supporting him as they limped toward safety. Behind them, Blackwood's voice carried over the storm. "This isn't over, Reynolds. We'll be back, and next time, no one walks away." By the time they reached the mine entrance, Chen was barely conscious, his weight heavy against Bill's shoulder. Sarah rushed forward, her face a mask of relief and anger. "Get him inside," she ordered, examining Chen's wound with practiced hands. "The bullet went through clean, but he's lost blood." As they carried Chen into the tunnel, Cooper and Maria hurried to meet them. "Samuel's plan worked," Cooper reported. "We've got them on the defensive, at least for now." "But they still have the box," Bill said grimly. "To hell with the box," Sarah snapped, cutting away Chen's blood-soaked pant leg. "He nearly died for you, Pa. All of them could have. And for what? Some old war papers." "It's more complicated than that, Sarah." "Then uncomplicated." Tell me what's in that box that's worth all this. The tunnel had gone quiet, everyone listening. Bill looked around at the faces of people who had trusted him, followed him, and now risked their lives because of his past. They deserved the truth, all of it. The box contains evidence, he began, his voice echoing in the stillness. Proof that I was responsible for the deaths of 47 Union soldiers during the war. Men from the 14th Colored Regiment. He told them everything then about the misdirected artillery fire, the cover-up afterward, Ezekiel Harlow's imprisonment, the letter Bill had ignored for years. As he spoke, he watched the shifting expressions on Sarah's face, shock, disbelief, and finally a sadness that cut him deeper than any bullet could. All these years, she said when he finished, her voice barely audible, you've been carrying this alone. I thought I was protecting you, protecting all of you, by lying, by giving us a fresh start, Maria interjected gently. Isn't that what Golden Creek has always been, a place for second chances? Before Sarah could respond, Samuel appeared at the tunnel entrance, his rifle still warm in his hands. Rain dripped from his hat brim as he surveyed the gathered crowd. They're pulling back, he reported, setting up camp about a mile down the valley. Looks like they're digging in for a siege. How many did we get? Cooper asked. 5 dead, maybe 3 wounded. They still outnumber us 3-1. Samuel's gaze found Bill. And they have the high ground on the North Ridge. We're surrounded. A heavy silence fell over the tunnel. The initial victory had been small, a brief delay, rather than a resolution. What happens now? Someone finally asked. All eyes turned to Bill. Despite everything he had revealed, despite his failures, they still looked to him for leadership in this crisis. It was more than he deserved, but perhaps it was a chance to finally make right what he had done wrong so long ago. Now would, he said, straightening his shoulders, we prepare for war. Outside, the storm raged on lightning, illuminating a landscape transformed by conflict. In the distance, the fires of Blackwood's camp flickered like malevolent stars, a constellation of vengeance that had been 20 years in the making. The siege of Golden Creek had begun. Night fell over Golden Creek, bringing with it an uneasy quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clean of clouds, stars gleaming like ice crystals in the darkness. From the mine entrance, Bill could see the campfires of Blackwood's men dotting the valley floor, a ring of light surrounding the settlement, closing it off from the outside world. Inside the main tunnel, Golden Creek's residents had organized themselves as best they could. Families huddled together on blankets spread across the rocky floor. The wounded, including Michael Chen, had been placed in a side chamber where Sarah could tend to them more easily. Armed men stood watch at the entrance and at the air shafts that could potentially serve as entry points. Samuel approached, his rifle slung across his back. Perimeters as secure as we can make it. I've got men watching all approaches. How long can we hold? Bill asked. Samuel's expression was grim in the lantern light. 2 days, maybe 3. We have 30 men who can fight, but only 20 with any real experience. Ammunition's limited, and water will be a problem if they find the creek source. And if they attack in force, then God help us all. Bill nodded slowly. He had been a soldier long enough to recognize a losing position. What about getting word out to Riverton, maybe? I sent 2 riders out before sunset, Jackson and the Morales boy. If they can slip past Blackwood's patrols, they might reach the sheriff by tomorrow night. The sheriff won't come, Maria said, joining them. She had been organizing the food supplies, rationing what they had. Not for us. We've always been on our own out here. Bill couldn't argue with her assessment. Golden Creek existed in the spaces between law and civilization, a haven for those who sought to escape both. It had been its strength. Now it was its vulnerability. Pa! Sarah's voice called from the makeshift infirmary. Chen's asking for you. Bill made his way through the crowded tunnel to where Chen lay on a pallet, his wounded leg elevated on folded blankets. The engineer's face was pale but alert, his eyes finding Bill's in the dim light. How are you feeling? Bill asked, kneeling beside him. Like I've been shot, Chen replied with a weak smile. But your daughter's a good doctor. Sarah, cleaning instruments nearby, didn't acknowledge the compliment. I need to ask you something, Chen continued, his voice low. About the box. Bill glanced around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. What about it? Was there anything else in it? Besides the documents and Harlow's letter. Bill frowned, thinking back. Just my old service medal and my journal from the war. Why? Chen's expression became troubled. Because I don't think that's what they really want. What do you mean? Think about it. Why come with such force for old papers? Why now after all these years? Chen shifted, wincing as pain shot through his leg. There must be something else, something you haven't considered. Bill was about to respond when a commotion at the tunnel entrance drew his attention. Cooper was arguing with someone, a young man Bill didn't immediately recognize. Let him through, Bill called, standing. The young man stumbled forward out of breath and wild-eyed. It was David Peterson, one of the twins who had first spotted riders watching the camp. Mr. Reynolds, he gasped. They've taken her. Taken who? Miss Sarah. She went out to gather more medical supplies from her cabin. I tried to stop her, but Bill's blood ran cold. He spun around to where Sarah had been working just moments before, finding only her abandoned instruments. When? He demanded, gripping David's shoulders. How long ago? Maybe 15 minutes. I was on watch at the West Tunnel when I saw her slip out. By the time I got there, they had her. 3 men on horseback. Samuel was already checking his rifle. We go after her. Now. No. Bill said, his mind racing. That's exactly what they want to draw us out. We can't just leave her with them, Cooper protested. We won't. Bill turned to address the gathered crowd, all watching with fearful eyes. I'm going. Alone. That's suicide, Maria objected. It's me they want. It's always been me. Bill checked his revolver, ensuring each chamber was loaded. And now they have the perfect leverage to get me. From his pallet, Chen spoke up. Bill, wait. If you're going, you need to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just about what happened during the war. Whoever is behind this, Harlow or someone else, they've been planning this for years. The timing, the resources. This is bigger than just your past. Bill nodded grimly. I know, but my daughter comes first. No one tried to stop him as he collected his coat and hat. As he prepared to leave, Samuel pressed something into his hand, a small Derringer pistol. Hide it, Samuel said quietly. They'll search you, but they might miss this. Bill tucked the small weapon into his boot. If I'm not back by dawn, don't wait. Get these people out through the eastern tunnels. Head for Riverton. We won't abandon you or Sarah, Cooper insisted. You'll do what's necessary to save this camp, Bill replied firmly. That's an order. He stepped out into the night, the cool air a shock after the close warmth of the tunnel. Above him, stars wheeled in their ancient courses, indifferent to the human drama playing out beneath them. Bill took a deep breath, feeling every one of his 58 years in the ache of his bones and the weight of his choices. Then he began walking toward Blackwood's camp, a solitary figure, moving through moonlight and shadow toward a reckoning 20 years in the making. The walk to Blackwood's camp felt both eternal and too brief. Each step brought Bill closer to Sarah, into whatever judgment awaited him. The moon cast his shadow long across the mud-slicked ground, a dark companion on this final journey. He was challenged at the perimeter by 2 guards who emerged from the darkness, rifles leveled at his chest. I'm William Reynolds, he said calmly. I believe your boss is expecting me. They escorted him into the camp, where dozens of men moved about between tents and campfires. Their eyes followed Bill with curious hostility as he passed. These weren't ordinary bandits, he noted. They moved with military discipline, weapons clean and ready. Whoever had assembled this force had resources and a purpose beyond simple revenge. At the center of the camp stood a large tent illuminated from within. The guards led Bill directly to it, pushing aside the canvas flap to reveal Silas Blackwood seated behind a folding table. The black iron box sat open before him, its contents spread across the wooden surface. And there in a chair beside the table sat Sarah, unbound but clearly a prisoner, her face pale but composed. When she saw Bill, her eyes widened in a silent warning he couldn't decipher. Reynolds. Blackwood greeted him without rising. Right on time. Your daughter said you'd come alone. Seems she knows you well. Let her go, Bill said. You have me now, and the box. Blackwood smiled thinly. All in good time. First we have matters to discuss. He gestured to one of the guards. Search him. Rough hands patted Bill down, finding and removing his revolver. They missed the Derringer in his boot. He's clean, sir. Good, leave us. The guards withdrew, leaving Bill alone with Blackwood and Sarah. Outside, the sounds of the camp continued, men talking, horses nickering, the crackle of fires. Sit, Blackwood ordered, indicating a chair opposite him. Bill remained standing. I said, let my daughter go. Pa, Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice steady, despite the circumstances. Listen to what he has to say. There was something in her tone, a certainty, an understanding that gave Bill pause. He studied her face, seeing not fear, but a strange resolve. Slowly he lowered himself into the chair. Wise choice, Blackwood said, leaning back. Now let's discuss why you're really here. I know why I'm here, Bill replied. Ezekiel Harlow sent you. This is about what happened to the 14th Regiment. Partly, Blackwood conceded, but the Reverend's ambitions extend beyond personal vengeance. He has a vision for this country, one that begins with exposing men like you. What do you mean, Reverend? Blackwood's smile widened. You really don't know, do you? Your old friend didn't just survive Prison Reynolds. He found God there. Or perhaps God found him. Either way, he emerged as a powerful voice for those seeking true justice in this broken nation. Bill glanced at the contents of the box spread across the table, his journal, the military documents, Harlow's letter. Where is he? Why doesn't he face me himself? All in good time. First, there's the matter of your confession. Confession. Blackwood pulled a sheet of paper from beneath the scattered documents. A full account of your actions during the Charleston campaign, your orders to fire on the 14th Regiment, your knowledge of the cover-up afterward, your refusal to testify on Harlow's behalf. He pushed the paper across the table. Sign it. Bill stared at the document. And if I do, what happens to Golden Creek, to my daughter? Your people will be allowed to leave unharmed. As for your daughter, Blackwood glanced at Sarah. That depends on her. Sarah met Bill's questioning gaze. I'll be staying, Pa. What? No. It's my choice, she said firmly. Someone needs to bear witness, to make sure the truth is finally told. Bill felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. Sarah, you don't understand what's happening here. I understand more than you think. Her eyes held a new hardness, a judgment he had never seen directed at him before. I read Harlow's letter years ago. I found the key and opened the box when I was 16. I've known the truth all this time. The revelation struck Bill like a physical blow. All this time, and you never said anything. I was waiting for you to tell me yourself. Disappointment colored her voice. I kept waiting, Pa, for years. And Imram, Blackwood watched this exchange with evident satisfaction. Family secrets have a way of poisoning everything they touch, don't they, Reynolds? He tapped the confession. Sign it. Not for me, not for Harlow, but for her. Let the truth finally set you both free. Bill looked down at the paper, then back at his daughter's resolute face. Everything he had done, the silence, the running, the hiding, had been to protect her from his shame. But in doing so, he had only deepened the wound, spread the poison. Give me a pen, he said quietly. Blackwood slid an inkwell and quill across the table. Bill dipped the nib and signed his name at the bottom of the confession with a steady hand. As he finished, a strange lightness came over him, as if a weight he had carried for decades had finally been set down. There, he said, pushing the paper back to Blackwood. It's done. Not quite. Blackwood folded the confession carefully and tucked it into his coat. Tomorrow at noon you'll repeat these words publicly, to your people and to mine, a formal acknowledgement of your crimes before witnesses. And then you'll accompany us to face a different kind of judgment. Blackwood stood gathering the contents of the box. The Reverend Harlow has established a camp 3 days' ride from here, a gathering of veterans and freedmen, men and women committed to building a new order from the ashes of the old. Your testimony will be the cornerstone of that foundation. A cold certainty settled in Bill's stomach. This wasn't just about his past sins. It was about something larger, something with implications beyond his own redemption. What exactly is Harlow planning? He asked. Blackwood's expression remained impassive. A reckoning, Reynolds, for all the broken promises this country made to its people, starting with men like you who betrayed their oaths. He gestured to the tent flap where guards waited outside. You'll spend the night under watch. I suggest you use the time to prepare your words carefully. Tomorrow's audience won't be as forgiving as I am. As the guards entered to escort Bill out, Sarah stood as well. "She stays," Blackwood said. "No," Bill protested. The deal was. The deal was your confession for your people's safety. Your daughter has chosen her own path." Blackwood's hand moved to the revolver at his hip. "Unless you wish to renegotiate our terms." Bill locked eyes with Sarah, silently pleading with her to reconsider, but her gaze remained steady, determined. "It's all right, Pa," she said softly. "This is where I need to be." As the guards led Bill from the tent, the last thing he saw was Sarah sitting back down at Blackwood's table, her posture straight and unyielding, a witness to history about to be rewritten. Bill was taken to a smaller tent at the edge of the camp, where two armed men stood guard outside. Inside, a bedroll had been laid out on the ground, alongside a tin cup of water and a plate of hardtack, the accommodations of a prisoner awaiting judgment. He sat on the bedroll, listening to the sounds of the camp gradually quieting as midnight approached. His mind raced with the implications of what he learned. Ezekiel Harlow hadn't just survived prison, he'd emerged as a leader, gathering followers, resources, planning something bigger than mere revenge. And Sarah, his daughter, had known his secret for years, had carried that knowledge silently, waiting for a confession that never came. Now she had aligned herself with his accusers, chosen to bear witness against him. The thought cut deeper than any physical wound. Time passed slowly. Bill found himself mentally retracing the path that had led him here, from that fateful day in Charleston, when smoke had obscured the battlefield and his shells had fallen on the wrong men, through years of silence, and running to this moment of final reckoning. Perhaps this was justice, after all. A rustling outside the tent drew his attention. The murmur of voices, then silence. Bill tensed hand, moving toward his boot where the derringer lay hidden. The tent flap lifted, and a figure slipped inside, not a guard but Sarah. She moved quickly to his side, kneeling on the ground beside him. "We don't have much time," she whispered. "The guard will be back in 5 minutes." "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Bill searched her face in the dim light. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine, Pa." Her voice was tight with urgency. "But you need to listen. This isn't what you think it is." "What do you mean?" Sarah glanced toward the tent entrance, then leaned closer. "Harlow isn't just seeking justice for what happened during the war. He's building an army. These men, they're the first wave. There are more camps, more followers. They're planning an uprising." Bill felt a chill run through him. An uprising against what? Against everything. The government, the railroad companies, the banks. Harlow believes the system is too corrupt to be reformed. He wants to tear it down and start over. Sarah's eyes were intense in the darkness. "Your confession isn't just about clearing his name. It's propaganda proof of the conspiracy he's been preaching about for years." "How do you know all this?" "I listened, watched. Blackwood talks freely when he thinks I'm just a woman with no understanding of politics." Her mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "He doesn't realize I grew up with your war stories and Maria's lessons on strategy." Bill processed this information, its implications unfolding in his mind. "So when you said you were staying, I was playing a part, buying time." Sarah took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I don't condone what you did, Pa. Your silence cost Harlow 15 years of his life, but what he's planning now will cost thousands more." "What about the confession I signed? Blackwood has it. He plans to take it to Harlow as proof of your cooperation." Sarah released his hand and reached into her boot, extracting a small folded paper. "I found this in the box when they weren't watching. I think it's what they're really after." Bill unfolded the paper carefully. In the dim light, he could just make out a list of names: military officers, politicians, businessmen. Beside each name were notations in his own handwriting, locations, dates, connections to the 14th Regiment incident. "My God," he breathed. "I'd forgotten about this. It was a list I compiled after the war, men who knew about the misdirected fire, but covered it up. Men who benefited from the silence. Men who now hold positions of power throughout the West," Sarah added. "Governors, judges, railroad barons. If Harlow exposes them all at once with proof of their complicity, it would destabilize the entire region." Bill refolded the paper, tucking it into his own boot alongside the derringer. "But why wait 20 years? Why now?" "I don't know, but tomorrow when you make your public confession, you need to be ready. There's more at stake here than just your redemption. Sarah glanced toward the tent entrance again. I have to go. The guard will be back. Bill caught her arm. Wait, how do we get out of this? There are at least 40 armed men between us and Golden Creek. Cooper and Samuel are preparing a diversion. When you hear it, be ready to move. She hesitated, then added, Chen said to tell you the eastern tunnel has been prepared. Whatever that means. Bill nodded, understanding immediately. Chen had rigged the tunnel with blasting oil not to collapse it, but to create a distraction. One more thing, Sarah said, her voice softening. I need to know. Did you ever try to make it right? After the war, did you ever try to find Harlow, to tell the truth? Bill closed his eyes, the shame of decades washing over him afresh. Once, I went to the prison where they were holding him in '66. Got as far as the gates. But I couldn't face him. Couldn't face what I'd done. He opened his eyes, meeting his daughter's gaze. It was the worst kind of cowardice, and now others will pay the price for it. Sarah's expression was unreadable in the darkness. Tomorrow you'll have another chance to choose differently. She leaned forward, pressing a quick kiss to his cheek. Be ready. Then she was gone, slipping out of the tent as quietly as she had entered, leaving Bill alone, with the weight of revelation and the faint hope of redemption. Outside, the camp had fallen silent. In the distance, an owl called 3 times, then twice more. A signal, perhaps, or just a nocturnal hunter on the prowl. Bill stretched out on the bedroll, his hand resting near his boot where both weapon and document lay hidden. Tomorrow would bring judgment one way or another, but for the first time in 20 years, he would face it with the truth as his shield rather than his burden. He closed his eyes and waited for dawn. Dawn arrived with the color of bruised skin, purple and yellow, streaking across the eastern sky. Bill had not slept. He sat on the bedroll back against a tent pole, watching light gradually filter through the canvas walls. Outside, Blackwood's camp stirred to life, the murmur of voices, the clank of cooked pots, horses snorting in the morning chill. A guard entered without announcement, dropping a tin plate of beans and a cup of coffee before Bill. Eat, the man ordered. Blackwood wants you presentable for your speech. Bill eyed the food without appetite. What time is it? Just past 6. You've got hours yet to think about what you're going to say. The guard's mouth twisted in a smirk. Make it good. You've got a big audience coming. What do you mean? Riders went out last night, bringing in folks from other settlements. Blackwood wants witnesses. Lots of them. The guard turned to leave, then paused. That daughter of yours, she's something. Sitting with Blackwood like an equal, helping plan it all out. Must be strange knowing your own blood turned on you. Bill revealed nothing, though the words stung. Sarah was playing a dangerous game, positioning herself within Blackwood's confidence. If they discovered her deception, he forced himself to eat, knowing he would need strength for whatever lay ahead. The beans were barely warm, the coffee bitter, but they would sustain him. As he ate, he listened to the camp, counting voices, tracking movements, building a mental map of the forces surrounding him. At least 40 men, as Samuel had estimated. Well-armed, well-organized. Not the typical border ruffians who occasionally troubled the frontier settlements. These were men with purpose, veterans most likely hardened by war and the broken promises that followed peace. By the time the plate was empty, Bill had formed the outline of a plan. Risky, dependent on too many variables, but a plan nonetheless. He slipped his hand into his boot, confirming both the derringer and the folded list remained secure. Then he settled back to wait, conserving energy for the moment when waiting would give way to action. Mid-morning brought Blackwood himself, ducking into the tent with 2 guards at his back. He looked as if he'd slept well, freshly shaved, his white hair neatly combed beneath his black hat. Reynolds, I trust you're prepared for your moment of truth. Bill rose slowly to his feet. Where's my daughter? We're busy, helping set up for the gathering. Blackwood studied him with cool assessment. You seem calmer than I expected. Most men facing judgment show more fear. I've been waiting for this day for 20 years, Bill replied evenly. Just didn't know what form it would take. Interesting perspective. Blackwood gestured to one of the guards, who produced a folded set of clean clothes. Get changed. Can't have you addressing the assembly looking like you spent the night in a pig pen. Bill accepted the clothes, a simple white shirt, dark trousers, and a black coat that wasn't his own. You're putting a lot of effort into this confession. It's not just a confession, Reynolds. It's a demonstration, the beginning of something much larger than your personal redemption. Blackwood moved toward the tent entrance. You have 1 hour, then we ride to the meeting place. And where is that? Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Neutral ground, between our camp and yours. We want your people to hear every word you say. After they left, Bill changed slowly mind, working through implications. The neutral ground would likely be the open area near the creek crossing a natural amphitheater formed by sloping banks on either side. Good sightlines, multiple approaches, potential for crossfire. The fresh clothes felt strange against his skin, like a costume for a role he had yet to fully understand. As he buttoned the unfamiliar coat, he noticed something sewn into the lining, a small embroidered symbol near the collar. A circle intersected by a cross. The same symbol he had glimpsed on some of Blackwood's men's gear. A marker of belonging, of shared purpose. The hour passed with agonizing slowness. Bill used the time to stretch working blood back into stiff muscles, preparing his body for whatever exertion might be required. When the guards finally returned, he was ready, outwardly composed, inwardly coiled like a spring. Outside, a horse waited, not his own mount, but a tall black gelding with a nervous eye. Blackwood sat astride his own horse nearby, surrounded by a dozen armed men. Of Sarah there was no sign. "Where's my daughter?" Bill demanded as they helped him mount. "Already at the meeting place. Don't worry, Reynolds. She's safe as long as you keep your end of our bargain." Blackwood nodded to his men. "Let's move out." They rode in formation, Bill at the center, surrounded by armed escorts. The morning had warmed considerably, the sun now high overhead, casting sharp-edged shadows across the landscape. As they crested a low rise, Bill could see their destination, the creek crossing, where a crude platform had been erected on the flat ground beside the water. And gathering around it, approaching from all directions, were people far more than Bill had expected. Blackwood's forces were there in strength, positioned strategically around the perimeter. But there were others too, farmers from outlying homesteads, traders, travelers, all drawn by the promise of spectacle. And on the far side, coming down from the direction of the mine, were the people of Golden Creek. Bill recognized Cooper at their head, and beside him Maria. They moved cautiously, armed men flanking the civilians, faces tense with apprehension. Of Samuel there was no sign of fact that gave Bill a flicker of hope. The sharpshooter was certainly positioned somewhere, with a clear view of the proceedings. As they approached the gathering, Bill spotted Sarah standing near the platform. She wore a clean dress he didn't recognize, her hair neatly arranged, looking for all the world like a respectable young woman attending a social function rather than a hostage at a military tribunal. When she saw him, her expression remained carefully neutral. Blackwood's party reached the platform first. Bill was helped from his horse and escorted up the wooden steps to stand facing the assembled crowd. From this vantage, he could see nearly 100 people gathered, the largest assembly Golden Creek had witnessed since its founding. Blackwood joined him on the platform, turning to address the crowd. "People of Golden Creek and neighboring settlements," he began, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed gathering. "You've been asked here today to witness an act of justice long denied. For too many years, the wounds of our great conflict have festered beneath the surface of this nation, hidden by lies and silence." The crowd stirred, murmurs rippling through the assembled observers. "Standing before you is William Reynolds, a man you've known as a leader, a founder of your community. But before he was these things, he was a soldier who betrayed his oath and caused the deaths of 47 Union men, black soldiers fighting for freedom." Gasps and exclamations rose from the crowd. Bill's people looked shocked, confused, angry. He sought familiar faces. Chen was there, supported by two miners, his wounded leg bandaged but his eyes alert. Cooper stood with arms crossed and expression unreadable. Maria watched everything with the calculating gaze of a woman who had survived by reading the intentions of men. "Today," Blackwood continued, "Reynolds will confess his crimes before you all. He will acknowledge the truth he has hidden for 20 years, and in doing so, he will begin to make amends for a betrayal that extends far beyond the battlefield." Blackwood turned to Bill, extending his arm in a theatrical gesture. "The floor is yours, Sergeant Reynolds. Tell these good people what you did." Bill stepped forward, feeling the weight of every eye upon him. The confession he had signed lay folded in Blackwood's pocket, but the words he would speak now would be his own. "My name is William Reynolds." He began, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. 20 years ago, I served as an artillery sergeant with the Union Army outside Charleston. On April 17, 1863, I received orders to shell a position reportedly occupied by Confederate forces. He paused, scanning the crowd, finding Sarah's eyes. She gave him the slightest nod, encouraging him to continue. What I didn't know, what I failed to verify, was that the position had already been taken by our own men, the 14th Colored Regiment. My shells killed 47 soldiers fighting for the same cause I was. Bill's voice roughened with emotion that was not feigned. Among the survivors was Chaplain Ezekiel Harlow, a man who had once called me friend. The crowd had gone utterly silent, hanging on his every word. When the mistake was discovered, those in command sought someone to blame. They chose Harlow, accusing him of passing information to the enemy. He was court-martialed and imprisoned for 15 years. Bill's hands clenched at his sides. I knew the truth. I could have spoken up, but I remained silent. I let an innocent man suffer for my mistake. Blackwood was watching him closely, satisfaction evident in his posture. Bill continued, moving carefully toward the words that would signal the next phase of his plan. That silence has haunted me every day since. I came west seeking escape, but there is no escaping what I did or failed to do. Bill turned, addressing not just the crowd now, but Blackwood directly. I believed I was protecting myself, my daughter, the community we built. But secrets fester like wounds. They poison everything they touch. He saw understanding dawn in Sarah's eyes. She subtly shifted her position, moving closer to where Chen stood with the miners. The truth is, Bill continued, raising his voice slightly, some betrayals run deeper than we can imagine. Some conspiracies reach further than a single battlefield mistake. Blackwood stiffened, sensing the shift in Bill's narrative. The men who ordered me to fire on that position, who covered up the truth afterward, they weren't just protecting themselves. They were protecting a system that continues to this day, that profits from division and conflict. Murmurs rippled through the crowd again. Blackwood stepped forward, a warning in his eyes, but Bill pressed on. The real betrayal wasn't just mine. It belongs to men in power across this nation who sacrifice lives for profit and position. Men who would use even legitimate grievances to further their own ambitions. That's enough, Blackwood said sharply, reaching for Bill's arm. But Bill was watching the ridgeline beyond the creek, where a thin spiral of smoke had just appeared exactly where the eastern mine tunnel emerged from the mountainside. The signal. The truth, Bill announced, his voice ringing across the suddenly tense gathering, is that justice and vengeance are not the same thing, and some who claim to serve the former are really pursuing the latter. The explosion, when it came, seemed to split the world in half. A massive plume of fire and smoke erupted from the eastern tunnel entrance, the concussion rolling across the valley like thunder. In the moment of shocked silence that followed, chaos erupted. Samuel's first shot took down the guard nearest Bill. His second struck Blackwood's hat from his head. The mercenary leader ducked, drawing his revolver, but Bill was already moving, driving his shoulder into Blackwood's midsection, sending them both crashing to the wooden platform. Around them, the assembly dissolved into panic. People scattered in all directions as more shots rang out Samuel's position on the ridge, providing covering fire for Cooper's men, who surged forward from the crowd, weapons drawn. Bill grappled with Blackwood on the platform, the two men rolling dangerously close to the edge. Blackwood was younger, stronger, but Bill fought with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose. His fingers closed around Blackwood's wrist, pinning the revolver between them. "You fool!" Blackwood snarled, his face inches from Bill's. "You've ruined everything." "That was the idea." Bill grunted, straining to keep the gun from turning toward him. The struggle continued for what seemed like an eternity, but could only have been seconds. Then a shadow fell across them. Sarah stood above a length of timber in her hands, part of the platform railing torn free in the chaos. "Get off my father," she said calmly, and brought the timber down on Blackwood's head with a sickening crack. The mercenary leader went limp. Bill shoved him aside and scrambled to his feet, reaching for the confession in Blackwood's pocket. "No time," Sarah urged, pulling him toward the platform steps. "We need to move." All around them, the battle had spread. Blackwood's men were regrouping, returning fire at Samuel's position on the ridge, and engaging with Cooper's forces in pockets of intense fighting. The civilians had largely fled, though some of the local settlers had joined the Golden Creek defenders. Chen, Bill asked as they ducked behind the platform. Already heading back to camp with Maria, the diversion worked better than expected. Half of Blackwood's outer perimeter pulled back to investigate the explosion. Sarah produced a revolver from the folds of her dress. Here, Samuel left this for you, said you'd know where to find him. Bill took the weapon, checking its chambers automatically. The North Ridge, it's where I'd be. He looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. You've been planning this with them all along. Since they took me yesterday, wasn't hard to get messages out. Blackwood's men are remarkably dismissive of a woman adjusting her stockings near an open tent flap. Sarah's smile was tight but genuine. I told you I was playing a part. A volley of shots struck the platform above them, sending splinters flying. They needed to move. Head for the creek bed, Bill ordered. Follow it back toward camp. Cooper's men will cover you. What about you? I'm going after Blackwood. He still has the confession in the box. Sarah's expression hardened. Not alone, you're not. Before Bill could argue, more shots rang out closer this time. Blackwood's men were advancing on the platform. Together then, Bill conceded, but we move fast. Blackwood won't stay down long. They broke from cover, sprinting toward a stand of cottonwoods near the creek bank. Bullets kicked up dust at their heels, but Samuel's covering fire from the ridge kept the mercenaries' heads down, long enough for them to reach shelter. From there, they worked their way back toward the platform using the chaos of the ongoing skirmish as cover. By the time they reached it, Blackwood was gone, but a trail of blood droplets led away toward where the horses had been tethered. He's wounded but mobile, Bill observed, following the trail with his eyes, and he's got at least 4 men with him. The sounds of fighting were intensifying again. Blackwood's forces, initially scattered, by the surprise attack were regrouping. Cooper and his men would soon be outnumbered. We need to get back to Golden Creek, Sarah said. Regroup with the others. Bill shook his head. You go. I'll pursue Blackwood. That's suicide, Pa. Even wounded, he has men around him. I don't have a choice. If he gets away with that confession with the list of names, he'll take it straight to Harlow. This doesn't end today, it just escalates. Sarah was about to respond when a shout came from nearby. One of Cooper's men, a young miner named Ellis, was waving urgently from the cover of a boulder. Reynolds, they're pulling back, all of them. Bill frowned, scanning the battlefield. Sure enough, Blackwood's forces were disengaging, retreating in disciplined groups toward the South Road. It's a feint, Bill muttered. They're regrouping for a larger assault. Or, Sarah's eyes widened, the camp. They're heading back to the camp. Bill realized she was right. Blackwood wasn't retreating, he was changing targets. With Golden Creek's defenders drawn out to the creek crossing the settlement, itself was vulnerable. We need to warn the others, he said, already moving toward Ellis's position. Sound the retreat. Everyone back to the mine. Now. The race back to Golden Creek became a desperate scramble across broken terrain. Bill, Sarah, and the scattered defenders moved as quickly as they could, but they were hampered by wounded comrades and the need for caution. Blackwood's forces had the advantage of horses and a head start. By the time the first buildings of the settlement came into view, smoke was already rising from the eastern edge of camp. They're burning us out, Cooper growled, limping alongside Bill. A bullet had grazed his good arm during the fighting, adding fresh blood to the old stains on his weathered coat. Through his field glasses, Bill surveyed the scene with growing dread. Blackwood's men had surrounded the camp, focusing their attack on the eastern approaches, the most direct route to the mine entrance, where the remaining Golden Creek residents had taken shelter. The tunnel, Bill said suddenly, lowering the glasses. If they secure the main entrance, our people are trapped. Not necessarily, Sarah countered. The air shafts, most are too small for a grown man, but the children could escape that way. And some of the women. That still leaves most of our people cornered. Cooper checked his rifle, counting his remaining ammunition with a grimace. We've got maybe 20 fighters left. They have twice that plus position. Bill considered their options, weighing risks against increasingly slim chances of success. We need a diversion, something to draw their attention away from the mine entrance. The powder magazine, Sarah suggested. It's on the opposite side of camp. If we could reach it... Too risky, Cooper objected. One stray bullet and the whole place goes up, including our people. What about the creek diversion? Bill asked, an idea forming. The sluice gates. If we open them fully? Cooper's eyes lit with understanding. Flood the lower camp. Force them to higher ground. Exactly. It won't stop them, but it will slow them down, create confusion. Bill turned to Sarah. Can you reach the control station without being seen? She nodded confidently. The maintenance tunnels run right beneath it. Chen showed me the access points months ago. Good. Take Ellis and Jackson with you. Once the water is released, get to the mine and help organize the evacuation through the air shafts. Bill looked at Cooper. You and I will circle around to the North Ridge. Link up with Samuel. Create enough noise to make them think a larger force is coming. Cooper gave a grim smile. Just like Missionary Ridge. Make them think the whole damn army is bearing down on them. Something like that. Bill checked his borrowed revolver one last time. Let's move. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they secure the entire perimeter. The group separated, each moving toward their assigned tasks with the quiet efficiency of people who understood exactly what was at stake. As Sarah disappeared into the underbrush with her two companions, Bill felt a familiar twist of fear for her safety, but it was tempered now by a new respect for her capabilities. She was no longer just his daughter to be protected, but a partner in this desperate struggle for survival. He and Cooper worked their way north using the rocky terrain for cover as they circled behind Blackwood's forces. Twice they had to freeze in place as patrols passed nearby, and once Cooper nearly lost his footing on a treacherous slope, saved only by Bill's quick grip on his collar. They reached Samuel's position just as the sun began its westward descent, casting long shadows across the valley. The sharpshooter had established himself in a natural depression atop the ridge, with clear sight lines to both the settlement and the approaches beyond. Took you long enough, Samuel greeted them, not taking his eye from his rifle scope. I count 37 hostiles in and around the camp. Blackwood's with a smaller group near the assay office. The black iron box, Bill asked, still with him far as I can tell. Your confession too, probably. Samuel shifted positions, slightly tracking a movement below. They're being cautious, methodical, clearing buildings one by one. They're looking for something, Cooper observed. Or someone, Bill added grimly. Anyone seen Chen? Samuel nodded toward the mine entrance, barely visible from their position. Hobbled in there about 10 minutes ago. Maria, too. But they've got at least 8 men watching the entrance now. Nobody's getting in or out that way. Bill checked his pocket watch. Sarah should be reaching the sluice controls any minute. Be ready to move when the water comes. They settled into tense silence, watching Blackwood's men tighten their grip on Golden Creek. Building by building, they secured the settlement, occasionally emerging with items of value: gold, dust, weapon supplies. But the methodical nature of their search suggested a purpose beyond mere looting. There, Samuel murmured, suddenly adjusting his scope. Blackwood just went into your cabin, Reynolds. Bill tensed. He's looking for the key. What key? To the black iron box. I gave it to Sarah before they took me, but Blackwood doesn't know that. He thinks it's still hidden in my cabin. Cooper frowned. Why would he need the key? Can't he just break it open? It's not about opening it, Bill explained. The key itself is important. It has an inscription, a quote from Lincoln's second inaugural, with malice toward none, with charity for all. Harlow gave it to me before the war ended. Understanding dawned on Samuel's face. A symbol. Harlow wants the complete set: the box, the confession, and the key. The physical embodiment of your betrayal and of his planned redemption, Bill agreed. Or revenge. Depends on how you look at it. Further speculation was cut short by a low rumble that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Seconds later, a torrent of water burst from the sluice gates at the western edge of the settlement, a churning mass that quickly overflowed the creek's banks and surged into the lower streets of Golden Creek. Sarah had succeeded. Blackwood's men reacted with surprise and confusion, some abandoning their positions to scramble for higher ground as the floodwaters rose. From the mine entrance, a group of defenders emerged, taking advantage of the chaos to engage the nearest mercenaries. That's our cue, Bill said, already moving. Samuel, can you keep Blackwood pinned down? We need to reach the mine. The sharpshooter chambered a fresh round. Consider it done. Bill and Cooper descended the ridge at a controlled run, using the distraction of the flood and the growing firefight to approach the settlement from the north. They had nearly reached the outer buildings when a shot rang out, the bullet striking a rock near Bill's head. "Sniper!" Cooper shouted, dragging Bill behind a water trough. More shots followed, pinning them in place. Their unseen adversary had the advantage of position and patience. "We're not getting to the mine this way," Bill muttered, peering cautiously around the trough's edge. "We need another route." Cooper pointed toward a nearby structure, the livery stable, its doors hanging open. "Through there. Connects to the blacksmith's. From there we can reach the back street." They waited for a lull in the firing, then sprinted for the stable bullets, kicking up dust at their heels. Inside, the smell of hay and horse greeted them, along with an unexpected sight, two saddled horses tethered and waiting. "Someone's planning a quick exit," Cooper observed, checking the animals. "Or arrange transportation for us," Bill countered, recognizing Chen's thoroughness in the preparations. "Either way, they're ours now." They led the horses through the stable's back entrance into the connecting passage to the blacksmith shop. The sounds of fighting had intensified, concentrated now around the mine entrance, where Golden Creek's defenders were engaged in a desperate holding action. As they emerged onto the back street, Bill could see the mine in the distance, and the growing number of Blackwood's men converging on it. The diversion had bought time, but not enough. Soon the defenders would be overwhelmed by superior numbers. "We need to draw them away from the mine," Bill decided. "Create an opening for our people to escape." Cooper looked at him sharply. "You're not thinking of playing bait?" "That's exactly what I'm thinking." Bill swung into the saddle of the nearest horse. "Blackwood wants me. The box. The confession. If he thinks I'm fleeing with all three, he'll have to split his forces. It's suicide, Bill. Not if I can reach the southern pass. There's a trail there only locals know, too narrow for a large group to follow quickly." Bill checked the horse's girth strap. "I just need enough of a head start." Cooper's expression was grim. "And what about the rest of us? The camp. Get everyone out through the air shafts. Head for Riverton. If I succeed, I'll meet you there in 3 days. And if you don't," Bill met his friend's eyes steadily, "then make sure Sarah knows I finally did the right thing." Cooper studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "I'll create a distraction. Draw some of them off. Give you a better chance. You don't have to. Save it, Reynolds." Cooper was already mounting the second horse. "Been following your lead for 15 years. Too old to change now." The two men clasped hands briefly, a lifetime of shared struggles passing between them in that simple gesture. 3 days, Cooper reminded him. Riverton. 3 days, Bill confirmed. They separated Cooper, heading toward the flooded main street, while Bill circled behind the row of buildings, working his way toward the southern edge of camp. The horse moved quietly beneath him, responding to the lightest touch of his knees, a well-trained animal worth its weight in gold in the current circumstances. Bill had nearly reached the southern perimeter when gunfire erupted from the direction Cooper had taken sharp clustered shots, followed by shouts of alarm. The distraction had begun. He urged the horse forward, breaking from cover into open ground. For a precious few seconds, he rode undetected, the animal's hooves eating up the distance between the settlement and the wooded slopes beyond. Then a shout went up from somewhere behind him. "Rider Southern Edge." Bill bent low over the horse's neck, pushing for more speed. A bullet whined past his ear, then another. He heard the thunder of pursuing hoofbeats growing louder. "Reynolds!" Blackwood's voice unmistakable even at a distance. "Stop him!" Bill risked a glance back. At least 6 riders had broken off from the main force, Blackwood among them, the black iron box visible in his saddlebag. The mercenary leader's face was a mask of fury, blood still visible on his temple where Sarah had struck him. The chase had begun in earnest now, a desperate race toward the southern pass. Bill's mount was fresher, but the pursuers had momentum and numbers on their side. And Blackwood rode like a man possessed, gradually pulling ahead of his companions, closing the gap yard by yard. The southern pass appeared ahead, a narrow defile between towering rock walls, barely wide enough for 2 riders abreast. Once through it, Bill could access the hidden trail he'd mentioned to Cooper, a treacherous path that would be suicide to navigate at speed unless you knew every twist and turn intimately. He was 50 yards from the pass entrance when the first bullet found its mark, not striking him, but his horse. The animal stumbled, front leg buckling, then recovered momentarily, but its stride was broken, its speed compromised. "Come on," Bill urged, feeling the horse's labored breathing beneath him. "Just a little further." 20 yards. 10. The pass entrance loomed before him, shadows deepening as the sun sank lower. Then the horse went down. Bill threw himself clear as the animal collapsed, rolling on impact to absorb the fall. Pain lanced through his left shoulder as he came to rest against the base of the rock wall. His revolver had been lost in the tumble, skittering away across stone. Winded but conscious, he struggled to his feet as Blackwood and his men closed in their horses, slowing as they approached the fallen rider. "It's over, Reynolds!" Blackwood called, drawing his weapon. "No more running." Bill pressed his back against the rock wall, glancing toward the pass entrance. So close. Just 30 feet of open ground between him and the narrow path that might have offered escape. But Blackwood was right. The running was over. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble today." Blackwood continued, dismounting carefully, keeping his revolver trained on Bill. "Cost me good men, disrupted carefully laid plans." "Ah, he seems fair," Bill replied, testing his injured shoulder with a wince. "Considering you were planning to use me to start a war." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Who said anything about starting a war?" "The war never ended, Reynolds. Not for men like Harlow. Not for the thousands betrayed by the false promises of Reconstruction. And you think bloodshed will fix that? More death, more hatred. I think justice delayed is justice denied." Blackwood stepped closer, his men fanning out behind him. "The Reverend has a vision for this country, one that begins with exposing the corruption at its heart. Your confession is just the first step." Bill thought of the list hidden in his boot names of powerful men across the West, all connected to the cover-up 20 years ago. Men whose exposure could indeed destabilize the fragile peace of the frontier. "Harlow was a good man once," Bill said quietly. "A man of God, of peace. Prison changes a man." Blackwood's smile was cold. 15 years watching his people's freedom stolen away again, piece by piece, that changes a man even more. "So this isn't about me at all. It's about using me. You're a means to an end, a symbol, the decorated Union sergeant who betrayed his own cause and now confesses his sins before the world." Blackwood gestured with his revolver. "Now we're returning to camp. You will help us secure the remaining residents of Golden Creek. They're coming with us to meet the Reverend. As hostages, as witnesses, to your public judgment and to what follows." Blackwood nodded to his men. "Bind him. Thoroughly this time." As two mercenaries moved forward with rope, a shot cracked from the rocky heights above. One of Blackwood's men jerked backward, clutching his chest. Samuel. More shots followed in rapid succession, precise and deadly. Blackwood's men scattered for cover, returning fire at the unseen sharpshooter. In the chaos, Bill saw his opportunity. He lunged forward, driving his shoulder into Blackwood's midsection. The mercenary leader staggered backward, his revolver discharging harmlessly into the air. Both men went down hard, grappling in the dust, as Samuel's covering fire kept the other mercenaries pinned down. Blackwood was younger, stronger, but Bill fought with the accumulated knowledge of a lifetime of survival. He trapped Blackwood's gun hand beneath his knee, then drove his fist into the other man's wounded temple. Blackwood howled in pain, momentarily stunned. Bill used the opening to wrench the revolver from his grasp, then rolled clear, coming up with the weapon aimed at his adversary. "Don't move," he ordered, breathing heavily. Blackwood froze, blood streaming afresh down the side of his face. His eyes held a mixture of pain and cold calculation. "Kill me and Harlow will still come," he said. "He has hundreds of followers now, camps across 3 territories. I don't plan to kill you." Bill kept the revolver steady. "I plan to use you just like you plan to use me." He reached into Blackwood's coat with his free hand, retrieving the signed confession. Then he turned his attention to the saddlebag containing the black iron box. "Your men are going to back off," Bill continued. "You're going to tell them to return to Golden Creek and release any prisoners. Then you and I are going to have a long talk about Ezekiel Harlow's real plans." Blackwood's laugh held no humor. You think it's that simple that your people aren't already dead or scattered? Cooper will have gotten them out. Most of them anyway. Perhaps, but for how long? Where will they go? What will they eat winter's coming, Reynolds? Your precious Golden Creek is finished either by my hand or by nature's. Before Bill could respond, a movement caught his eye, one of Blackwood's men, having worked his way around to a flanking position, rifle raised. The shot came before Bill could react, the bullet striking him high in the chest, spinning him halfway around. He maintained his grip on the revolver by sheer force of will, returning fire even as he felt warmth spreading across his shirt. His shot found its mark. The rifleman fell, but Blackwood was already moving, lunging for Bill's legs, taking him down to the ground. The impact drove the air from Bill's lungs, the pain in his chest blossoming into white-hot agony. They struggled in the dust, Blackwood clawing for the revolver, Bill fighting to maintain his grasp, despite the growing weakness in his limbs. Above them, Samuel's rifle spoke again and again, keeping the other mercenaries at bay, but unable to target Blackwood without risking Bill. The revolver discharged between them, the bullet striking stone fragments, ricocheting harmlessly away. Bill felt his strength ebbing, the wound in his chest, pumping his life onto the thirsty ground beneath him. With a final surge of desperate energy, he drove his knee upward, catching Blackwood under the chin. The mercenary leader's head snapped back, giving Bill the opening he needed. He brought the revolver around, pressing it directly against Blackwood's chest. "Enough!" he gasped, finger tightening on the trigger. Blackwood went still, recognizing the resolve in Bill's eyes. "You won't shoot an unarmed man? Not in cold blood. Not the great William Reynolds." "You're right," Bill acknowledged. With tremendous effort, he pushed Blackwood away, then struggled to his feet, revolver still trained on his adversary. "Get up, slowly." Blackwood complied, hands raised, watching Bill with the calculating patience of a predator assessing wounded prey. "Now call off your men," Bill ordered, swaying slightly as blood loss began to take its toll. "Tell them to pull back. Or what, you'll shoot me, then what, my men will kill you where you stand. Maybe, but you'll still be dead." "Sakanam," Bill steadied the revolver with both hands. "And Harlow will never get his grand confession." For a long moment, Blackwood considered his options, weighing the determination in Bill's eyes against his own chances of survival. Finally, he turned toward his men. "Stand down," he called. "Pull back to the tree line." Gradually, the firing ceased. Samuel's rifle fell silent as well, though Bill knew the sharpshooter was still watching, still covering him from above. "Now what, Reynolds?" Blackwood asked, turning back to face him. "You're bleeding out. Your camp is overrun. Your people scattered. You've lost." Bill felt the truth of those words in the growing coldness of his extremities, the darkening edges of his vision. But he wasn't finished yet. "The box," he said, gesturing toward Blackwood's horse with the revolver. "Bring it to me." Blackwood hesitated, then moved slowly to his mount, retrieving the black iron box from the saddlebag. He held it out to Bill, who took it with his free hand, tucking it awkwardly under his arm. "The key," Blackwood said suddenly. "Where is it?" "Safe," Bill replied, "with someone who'll know what to do with it." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Blackwood's face for the first time. "Harlow needs that key. It's part of the symbol. I know." Bill took a step backward toward the pass entrance. "Tell Harlow something for me. Tell him I'm sorry for everything. But this isn't the way to make it right." "You think your apology means anything after 20 years, after what he suffered?" "No, but I think he needs to hear it anyway." Bill continued his slow retreat, each step requiring more effort than the last. "And tell him I kept the most important part of our old friendship, which is the list. The names of every man who was part of the cover-up, every officer and politician who profited from our silence." Bill managed a grim smile. "He'll have to find that on his own." Understanding dawned in Blackwood's eyes. "You have it. The list Harlow's been searching for all these years. Had it all along. Part of why I ran so far." Bill had reached the entrance to the pass, now the narrow defile that would lead to the hidden trail if he could stay conscious long enough to navigate it. "You won't make it 10 steps in your condition?" Blackwood observed coldly. "Probably not, but it'll be 10 steps you can't follow." With that, Bill turned and staggered into the shadows of the pass, the black iron box clutched to his bleeding chest, Harlow's confession secure in his pocket. Behind him, he heard Blackwood shout orders to his men, but the sound seemed increasingly distant, as if coming from underwater. The wound was bad, he could feel it with each labored breath, each faltering heartbeat. But he had one task left to complete, one final duty to those who depended on him. Leaning heavily against the rock wall, Bill Reynolds began the most important journey of his life, a race against death itself, with the future of Golden Creek hanging in the balance. Darkness had fully claimed the land. By the time Sarah reached the rendezvous point, a shepherd's hut halfway between Golden Creek and Riverton, long abandoned, but still standing against the elements. Inside, Cooper had established a temporary headquarters for the survivor's lantern, light spilling from the cracks between weathered boards. She slipped through the door to find the small space crowded with familiar faces, residents of Golden Creek, who had escaped through the air shafts and maintenance tunnels. Children huddled against their mothers, eyes wide with shock. Men stood guard at windows, rifles ready. In one corner, Maria tended to the wounded, her movements efficient despite her own exhaustion. "Sarah!" Chen called from where he sat propped against the wall, his injured legs stretched before him. "Any sign of your father?" She shook her head, the weight of worry heavy on her shoulders. "Nothing. Samuel's still out there searching." Cooper approached, his face grim in the lantern light. "How many made it out?" 43, Sarah reported. "Most of the women and children, about half the men. The rest—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Captured or scattered," Cooper concluded. "We'll find them." "What about Blackwood's men? Are they still searching?" "Seems like they've pulled back to Golden Creek for now, using it as their base." Cooper ran a hand through his gray hair. "Samuel reported seeing them fortifying positions, setting up a proper camp. They're not going anywhere." Sarah moved to the rough-hewn table at the center of the hut where a map of the region had been spread out. "We need to get these people to Riverton. They need proper shelter, food." "Agreed, but we can't all move at once. Too noticeable." Cooper indicated points on the map. "We'll split into smaller groups. Take different routes. First light tomorrow." As they discussed logistics, the door opened again. Samuel entered, bringing with him the chill of the night air and news that froze the blood in Sarah's veins. "Found signs of a firefight near the southern pass," he reported without preamble. "Bill's horse is down. Blood trail leading into the Narrows." "My father?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "No sign of him. But the blood—" Samuel hesitated. "It was substantial." The hut fell silent, all eyes turning to Sarah. In that moment, she felt the full weight of her father's legacy settle onto her shoulders, the responsibility for these people, for the future of whatever Golden Creek might become. "He's alive," she said firmly, as much to convince herself as the others. "He made it to the hidden trail. He'll find us." No one contradicted her, though the doubt was visible in their eyes. "First priority is getting these people to safety," she continued, turning back to the map. "Then we regroup, plan our next move." "Against Blackwood?" Chen asked skeptically. "With what army?" "We don't need an army, we need information." Sarah looked around the room, meeting each gaze in turn. "My father figured out what Blackwood and Harlow are really planning. Something bigger than revenge. Something that threatens more than just Golden Creek." "How do you know this?" Maria asked. "Because he told me. Before the ambush at the creek crossing." Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her boot, where she had hidden the key to the black iron box. "It's about a list. Names of powerful men across the territories, men involved in a cover-up during the war. Men Harlow plans to expose all at once, creating chaos he can exploit." Cooper whistled softly. "That would do it. Destabilize the entire region." "Exactly. Which is why we need to get to Harlow before Blackwood does. Before this escalates further." Samuel leaned against the doorframe, rifle cradled in his arms. "And how exactly do we do that? We don't even know where Harlow's camp is." "Actually," Sarah replied, "I think I do. Blackwood wasn't as careful with his maps as he should have been. 3 days ride south, a place called Prophet's Canyon." The name sent a ripple of recognition through the room. Prophet's Canyon was known to most frontier settlers, a remote valley rumored to have been used by Mormon dissenters years earlier. Isolated, defensible with its own water source. If Harlow's building an army, Cooper mused, that's where he'd do it. Then that's where we go, Sarah declared. Once our people are safe in Riverton. A commotion outside interrupted their planning, the sound of approaching hoofbeats, then urgent voices. Everyone tensed, weapons raised toward the door. Samuel moved to the window, peering carefully through a crack in the boards. Single rider, he reported. Coming fast. Blackwood? Cooper asked, checking his revolver. Can't tell. Too dark. The hoofbeats slowed, then stopped just outside the hut. Silence fell, broken only by the nervous breathing of the gathered survivors. Samuel positioned himself beside the door, ready to confront whoever entered. A voice called from outside, weak but unmistakable. Sarah! She was moving before anyone could stop her, pushing past Samuel, flinging open the door to find a figure slumped over a horse's neck, barely conscious but somehow still in the saddle. Pa! She cried, rushing forward. Bill Reynolds lifted his head with visible effort, his face gray in the spill of lantern light from the open door. Blood had soaked through his shirt, dried to a dark crust down his left side. But his eyes were clear, focused on his daughter's face. Sarah, he whispered, I made it. As Cooper and Samuel helped him from the saddle, Sarah saw what he clutched against his chest, the black iron box, its metal surface smeared with her father's blood. Get him inside, she ordered, her medical training taking over. Quickly! They carried Bill into the hut, laying him carefully on a cleared space near the fire. Maria was already preparing bandages, boiling water for cleaning the wound. Sarah cut away the blood-soaked shirt, revealing the extent of the damage, a bullet wound high in the chest. The exit wound, a ragged tear beneath his shoulder blade. You should have died from this, she murmured as she worked, cleaning dried blood from around the wound. Almost did, Bill confirmed, his voice barely audible. Horse found me, in the pass. Must have followed my scent. Don't talk, Sarah instructed, probing the wound gently. Save your strength. But Bill reached up, catching her wrist with surprising strength. No time. Listen. The box, I got it back. And this. His other hand fumbled at his pocket, extracting a folded bloodstained paper. My confession. Blackwood had it. Cooper took the paper, examining it briefly before tucking it securely into his own coat. You did good, Bill. Now let Sarah patch you up. Not finished, Bill insisted, his grasp on Sarah's wrist tightening. The list. Boot. Left boot. Understanding dawned on her face. Sarah carefully removed her father's left boot, finding within it a folded document miraculously preserved despite the ordeal its carrier had endured. She unfolded it just enough to confirm its contents, a list of names, dates, locations. I've got it, Pa, she assured him, refolding the paper and securing it within her own clothing. It's safe. Bill relaxed slightly, his hand falling away from her wrist. Good. Harlow. Mustn't get it. Not yet. Not until... His voice trailed off, strength failing. Sarah returned to treating his wound, knowing the odds were against his survival. The blood loss alone should have been fatal. The fact that he had managed to ride miles in such condition spoke to a will that defied understanding. As she worked, the other survivors gathered around, forming a protective circle around the man who had led them for so many years. Even the children stood in solemn witness, instinctively understanding the gravity of the moment. Will he make it? Chen asked quietly, having dragged himself closer to his old friend's side. Sarah didn't answer immediately, focusing on cleaning and bandaging the wound. When she finally sat back, her hands stained with her father's blood, her expression was cautiously hopeful. The bullet passed clean through, missed his heart by inches. If infection doesn't set in, she shook her head. It's in God's hands now, or fate's, or whatever power you believe in. He's too stubborn to die, Cooper declared with more confidence than he clearly felt. Aren't you, Bill? Bill's eyes had closed, his breathing shallow but steady. At Cooper's words, the ghost of a smile touched his lips, though he didn't respond otherwise. We should let him rest, Maria suggested, gently ushering the onlookers back. As the crowd dispersed, returning to their preparations for the journey to Riverton, Sarah remained at her father's side. The black iron box sat between them, its presence a tangible reminder of all that had led to this moment, the secrets, the silence, the decades of running from a past that had finally caught up with them. With trembling fingers, she withdrew the key from her boot. The key she had taken from her father years ago, made a copy of, then returned without his knowledge. The key that had first unlocked the truth for her, and now might help unravel a conspiracy spanning 20 years and thousands of miles. Bill's eyes opened watching as she inserted the key into the box's simple lock. "You had it all along," he murmured. "Since I was 16, she confirmed. "I found it hidden in your watch case. And you never said anything. I was waiting for you to trust me with the truth." Sarah turned the key, hearing the mechanism click. "But you never did." "I wanted to protect you." "I know." She lifted the lid, revealing the contents, the journal, military documents, Harlow's letter. "But some burdens are meant to be shared, Pa. Some truths need to be spoken aloud." Bill's hand moved to cover hers atop the box. "I'm sorry, Sarah, for all of it." "I know that too." She managed a small smile. "Rest now. We'll talk more when you're stronger." But as she watched her father's eyes close again, Sarah wasn't certain there would be more time for talking. The wound was severe, his body weakened by age and the day's brutal events. Even if he survived the night, the journey ahead would test his remaining strength to its limits. Outside the hut, the night deepened toward midnight stars wheeling in their ancient courses above a landscape forever changed by the day's violence. Golden Creek lay silent in the distance, its buildings dark silhouettes against the moonlit sky, its future uncertain. And somewhere beyond in Prophet's Canyon, Ezekiel Harlow waited, a ghost from the past reaching into the present, with hands shaped by 15 years of imprisonment and decades of righteous anger. The reckoning had only just begun. Dawn broke over the shepherd's hut with the color of tarnished silver. Inside, Sarah dozed fitfully beside her father, having maintained vigil through the long night. Bill's condition remained precarious, his breathing shallow but steady, skin hot with fever as his body fought against trauma. The sound of approaching riders roused her. She reached for her revolver, then relaxed as Cooper's voice called a greeting to the sentries outside. The door swung open, admitting Cooper and two riders Sarah didn't recognize, a shopkeeper and what appeared to be a banker or lawyer from Riverton. "Sarah," Cooper said quietly, "Sheriff Holden sent these men. Got word to him about what happened." The better-dressed man stepped forward. "James Whitcomb, ma'am. I represent the Territorial Governor's office. We've been tracking Blackwood's group for some time. The governor knows about this, knows enough to be concerned. Blackwood's been recruiting throughout the territory, former soldiers mostly. Claims to represent a preacher named Harlow." "Ezekiel Harlow," Sarah confirmed, "a former Union chaplain. He has history with my father." Whitcomb produced a folded document. "Governor's authorized a militia, 200 men assembling in Riverton. We're prepared to move against Blackwood and Harlow, but we need information." "We have some of what you need," Sarah said carefully, "but it comes with conditions." Whitcomb's expression tightened. "This isn't a negotiation, Miss Reynolds. It's more complicated than that." Sarah moved to the map on the table. "Harlow was wrongfully imprisoned for 15 years. His grievances are legitimate, even if his methods aren't. What exactly do you want?" "Guarantees, written assurances that the full truth will be heard, that Harlow receives a fair trial, not summary execution, that the men named in our evidence face investigation for their roles in the original cover-up." "You're asking a lot for people in your position." "Shirum. We're offering a lot. Information that could save many lives." Sarah held his gaze. "And prevention of a conflict that could spread across 3 territories." Whitcomb finally nodded. "I'll take your terms to the governor. Now what can you tell me about Harlow's location?" Sarah indicated Prophet's Canyon on the map. "Here, 3 days' ride south." After providing details about Blackwood's forces and weaponry, Sarah produced the list from her father's boot. "This is what Harlow really wants. Names of every officer and politician who participated in the cover-up, men who allowed an innocent man to be imprisoned while advancing their careers." Whitcomb scanned its contents, his expression troubled. "These names, some of these men are territorial judges now, land commissioners, military commanders." "Exactly," Sarah said grimly, "which is why Harlow's crusade goes beyond personal revenge. He's targeting a system that protected the powerful at the expense of justice." After Whitcomb departed, Bill stirred, his eyes clouded with pain but aware. "Sarah," he whispered. She leaned closer. "I'm here, Pa. I heard militia, Prophet's Canyon. Yes, the governor's sending men to stop Blackwood before he reaches Harlow." Bill's hand moved feebly, grasping hers. "No, must go. Myself. Must face Harlow." "You can barely speak, let alone travel," Sarah objected. "Promise me, if I can't go, you'll take my words to him, the whole truth." She met his gaze, recognizing the determination that had defined William Reynolds throughout his life. Finally, she nodded. "I promise, but only if you truly can't go yourself, and not alone." By midday, Sarah Cooper, Samuel, and a recovered Michael Chen prepared for their journey to Prophet's Canyon. Maps were studied, weapons, clean provisions packed. Bill drifted in and out of consciousness, offering guidance during his lucid moments. "Ezekiel was a man of faith," Bill murmured. "Believed in redemption, above all else. Approach openly, unarmed if possible. Speak truth, without reservation. He'll recognize sincerity." Samuel returned from scouting with troubling news. "Blackwood's men are on the move. At least 20 riders heading south. Fast. Heading for Harlow," Cooper concluded. "With news of Bill's escape, the lost confession, and the militia gathering," Chen added, "they'll accelerate whatever plans they had." "How long before they reach Prophet's Canyon?" Sarah asked. 2 days if they push hard, Samuel estimated. "Then we leave tonight," Sarah decided. "If Blackwood reaches Harlow, first gives him a twisted version of events, we lose any chance of peaceful resolution." As darkness fell, final preparations were made. 4 horses waited outside, the best remaining from Golden Creek's stables. The black iron box was secured in Sarah's saddlebags alongside her medical supplies and Bill's confession. "Ready?" Cooper asked as Sarah emerged from the hut. She nodded, casting one final glance at the dwelling where her father lay. "As ready as we'll ever be." They mounted silently. Samuel took the lead, his hunter's instincts best suited for navigating darkness. Behind them, the shepherd's hut glowed faintly with lantern light, a solitary beacon in the vast darkness. Within its walls, Bill Reynolds continued his own battle, unaware that his daughter now carried forward the reckoning he had avoided for 20 years. Prophet's Canyon revealed itself as Sarah and her companions crested the final ridge on the morning of the 3rd day. Nestled against the western wall stood Harlow's camp, not just a temporary gathering, but a settlement taking shape. Dozens of structures spread in concentric circles around a central area. "Must be over 200 people down there," Cooper murmured. "Not all fighters," Chen observed. "See the washing lines, children playing. This isn't just a military camp. It's a community," Sarah realized. "A new beginning. Exactly what Golden Creek once was." Samuel, scanning the approaches, spoke up. "No sign of Blackwood's group. We beat them here." "Not by much," Cooper said. "Those tracks we crossed were fresh. 6 hours, maybe less." "So what now?" Chen asked. "We can't just ride in. They'll shoot us on sight." Sarah remembered her father's advice. "We send a messenger first, one person under a white flag, requesting an audience with Reverend Harlow." "And who's going to volunteer for that suicide mission?" Cooper asked skeptically. "I am." Despite their objections, Sarah was resolute. "I'll approach alone, carrying only the confession in the box. You 3 position yourselves on the ridgeline, covering my retreat if necessary." "And if they take you hostage," Samuel asked, "then you have the list, the leverage." A strip of white cloth was attached to a branch. Sarah surrendered her weapons and began the descent into Prophet's Canyon. Halfway down, sentries spotted her. "That's far enough," one called. "State your business." "My name is Sarah Reynolds. I've come to speak with Reverend Ezekiel Harlow on a matter of great importance." "Reynolds? Any relation to William Reynolds of Golden Creek?" "His daughter." Minutes later, the sentry returned with 3 riders. The central figure commanded attention, a tall black man in his early 60s, white clerical collar visible beneath a dark coat. "Miss Reynolds," he greeted her. "I am Reverend Ezekiel Harlow. I understand you wish to speak with me. Sarah inclined her head respectfully. Thank you for agreeing to meet Reverend. I've come on behalf of my father who is unable to travel due to serious injury. Injury? Harlow revealed nothing. How unfortunate. And what message does William Reynolds send after 20 years of silence? Truth, Reverend? The full truth about what happened to the 14th Regiment and to you. Sarah indicated her satchel. I have his signed confession and the black iron box he's kept all these years. Interesting. Silas Blackwood reported the box and confession were lost during his encounter with your father. Blackwood has been here already. Arrived before dawn, currently recovering from injuries he claims were inflicted by your father. Harlow studied her. He tells quite a different story than the one I suspect you're prepared to share. Sarah's heart sank, but she pressed on. Will you hear my father's words, Reverend? Will you allow the possibility that there might be more to this story than revenge would suggest? You've come unarmed into the camp of a man your father betrayed, Harlow observed. Either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both, Sarah acknowledged, but necessary. In Harlow's quarters, Sarah placed the satchel on the table between them. Before I begin, Reverend, I should know how much Blackwood has already told you. That your father admitted his role in the shelling of the 14th Regiment, that he signed a confession but later stole it back, that he and the people of Golden Creek attacked Blackwood's men without provocation. And you believed him? I've learned to be cautious about what I believe. 15 years in a military prison teaches one to question all testimony. Sarah opened the satchel, removing the confession and the black iron box. My father's confession, written under duress but containing the essential truth. He did order the artillery strike that killed 47 men of the 14th Regiment. He did remain silent when others, including you, were blamed. Harlow read it slowly, then looked expectantly at the box. The key, Sarah withdrew it from her pocket. Harlow accepted it, turning it over to read the inscription. With malice toward none, with charity for all, he murmured. Lincoln's second inaugural. I gave this to your father the day after Appomattox. Inside the box, Harlow seemed to be looking for something specific. The list, he said finally. It's not here. Sarah tensed. What list? Don't play games, Miss Reynolds. The list of men involved in the cover-up. Your father compiled it after the war. Where is it safe with people who understand its significance? That list is evidence of a conspiracy that destroyed countless lives, said Reverend Taylor Harlow's assistant. It belongs to the Reverend. And what exactly is your cause? Sarah asked Harlow directly. Our aims extend beyond my personal vindication, Harlow admitted. The men on that list represent a system that has continued to betray the promises made after the war. Men who now control land courts government across these territories. Men you intend to expose or punish. Men who must be held accountable if true reconciliation is ever to occur. Harlow leaned forward. The list, Miss Reynolds. Where is it? The territorial governor has it, she said finally, along with a militia of 200 men currently marching toward this canyon. The room fell silent. Harlow's expression remained impassive. I advocated for you, Sarah continued, full investigation of all named individuals, public acknowledgement of the original injustice, and a fair trial for you should it come to that, not summary execution as an insurrectionist. You advocated for me, the daughter of the man I've pursued for 20 years. I advocated for justice, complete justice, not selective retribution. Before Harlow could respond, a commotion erupted outside. A messenger reported riders approaching from the north. Through a spyglass, Sarah recognized Blackwood leading the column alongside a man Cooper identified as Judge Wilson, a territorial judge named in Bill's list. Blackwood isn't working alone, Chen explained urgently. He has backing, powerful backing. We represent everything certain interests, fear integration, self-governance, independence from their economic control. Clara Freeman Harlow's teacher realized. And the list my father compiled, they're now in positions to lose the most if communities like ours flourish, Sarah added. You believe Blackwood works for them, Harlow said, that his mission was never about bringing me justice, but about eliminating threats to their power. It makes sense, Samuel said. Use your legitimate grievance as cover for destroying independent settlements. Turn potential allies against each other. We need to take a stand, Sarah declared. Together. Show them we won't be manipulated into destroying each other. Harlow turned to Sarah with grave resolution. Your father's confession, was it sincere, not just the admission of guilt, but the remorse? Yes, Sarah replied without hesitation. He's carried that burden for 20 years. In the end, he chose truth over safety. Harlow nodded slowly. Then perhaps it's time I honor the man he was before the war. He extended his hand toward Sarah. A temporary alliance, Miss Reynolds, against our common enemy. Not temporary, Reverend, the beginning of something more lasting. As Blackwood's group approached, he called across the distance. An interesting gathering, making new friends. Reverend recognizing old enemies. Blackwood, Harlow replied. Did you think we wouldn't discover your true allegiance? Judge Wilson urged his horse forward. This is sedition, Harlow, open rebellion against territorial authority. Is it sedition to seek justice? Your Honor, Sarah challenged, to expose corruption that reaches from Charleston to these territories. The ravings of a criminal's daughter, Wilson dismissed. We have a very detailed list, Cooper interjected. Names, dates, connections. Currently in the hands of the territorial governor, along with sworn testimony. This revelation sent a visible shock through Wilson and the riders behind him. Blackwood's expression darkened, his hand moving toward his sidearm. A bluff, he declared. Test us and find out, Samuel suggested. The militia will be here by tomorrow. Whatever you planned will be witnessed by 200 territorial soldiers. Uncertainty rippled through Blackwood's men, mercenaries willing to fight for pay, but not to die in a lost cause. After urgent consultation with Wilson, Blackwood announced their withdrawal, though not without a final threat. Remember this day, Harlow. Remember the choice you made. There will be consequences. There always are, Harlow replied simply. For all choices, I choose truth over vengeance, reconciliation over division. As Blackwood's forces retreated, Harlow turned to Sarah. Your people, the survivors of Golden Creek, where are they? Heading to Riverton for safety. Harlow made a surprising decision. Send riders to intercept them. Offer them sanctuary here until their settlement can be rebuilt. And organize a medical team to accompany Miss Reynolds back to her father. Bring him here if he can be safely moved. You would shelter the man you've pursued for 20 years, Reverend Taylor asked incredulously. I would offer healing to a man who has finally chosen truth, Harlow replied. And in doing so, perhaps find healing for myself as well. When Sarah and her medical team reached the shepherd's hut, they found it nearly empty. Maria Hernandez was calmly packing the last supplies. Where is everyone? Where's my father? Sarah demanded. Gone to Riverton, early this morning. Maria continued her methodical packing. All except your father. Is he alive and improving? The fever broke yesterday. He insisted on leaving as soon as he could sit a horse. Leaving to where? Where do you think? Maria gestured to a message on the table, a note in Bill's uneven hand, explaining he had gone to face Harlow himself. They remounted immediately, pushing back toward Prophet's Canyon. Hours later, Clara spotted a solitary figure on horseback, Bill Reynolds, pale but determined, riding slowly toward the canyon. Pa, Sarah called. Sarah, he greeted her weakly. Shouldn't you be in Prophet's Canyon by now? I was. We formed an alliance with Harlow against Blackwood. Bill nodded slowly. In the list, the names, with the territorial governor as leverage to ensure a fair resolution for both communities. As twilight deepened, they approached the canyon entrance, where Ezekiel Harlow himself waited with a small party lanterns, casting golden light in the gathering gloom. For a long moment, silence held between the two men. William Reynolds, Harlow finally spoke. 20 years is a long time between conversations. Too long, Ezekiel, Bill acknowledged, though the fault for that is entirely mine. Bill straightened in his saddle. I, William Reynolds, ordered the artillery strike that killed 47 men of the 14th Regiment on April 17, 1863. When the mistake was discovered, I remained silent. While you were accused and imprisoned for treason, you never committed. The stark confession hung in the air. Bill continued, I carried that silence like a stone in my chest for 20 years. It poisoned everything it touched. I can't undo the harm it caused, can't restore the years taken from you, or the lives lost under my shells. But I can finally speak truth and face whatever judgment you deem appropriate. When we last spoke, William, it was the day after Appomattox, Harlow recalled. You said that true peace would require more courage than war ever did, that reconciliation would demand greater sacrifice than battle. I spent 15 years in prison, William, and another 5 hunting you. 20 years consumed by the past. I know, Bill acknowledged, and there's no apology adequate to that suffering. No, Harlow agreed. There isn't. He paused. But perhaps there's something more valuable than apology to be found here. What's that? The future. Harlow gestured toward the canyon. Your daughter and I have begun an alliance born of necessity, but potentially lasting beyond this crisis. 2 communities both founded on the principle of second chances. Harlow extended his hand across the space that separated them. I offer the possibility of reconciliation, the beginning of a path, not its completion. There remains much to resolve between us. But yes, I offer a chance to finally put down the burdens we've both carried too long. With trembling fingers, Bill clasped Harlow's hand. The contact released something within him, a tension held for decades, suddenly eased. Thank you, he whispered. Come, Harlow said. You need medical attention, and there is much still to discuss. The territorial militia will arrive tomorrow, and we must present a united front if both our communities are to survive. As they rode into Prophet's Canyon, Sarah moved alongside her father. You did it, Pa, she said softly. You faced him. We both did, Bill replied. And now we face whatever comes next, together. They rode forward as darkness claimed the land lantern light, guiding their way into an uncertain but newly hopeful future. Behind them, the ghosts of Charleston, of prison cells and artillery smoke of 20 years' silence seemed to recede, not forgotten, but perhaps finally beginning to lose their power to define what lay ahead. The next morning, as the territorial militia approached Prophet's Canyon, a small delegation rode out to meet them. Bill and Harlow at its center, flanked by Cooper Samuel and leaders from Harlow's community. The black iron box had been placed on a stone between them, a silent witness to their unified stand. Colonel Richard Danforth, leading the militia, reined his horse to a stop before them. William Reynolds, reports suggested you were dead or severely wounded. Rumors of my demise were somewhat exaggerated, Colonel, Bill replied, though not for lack of trying on Blackwood's part. Danforth's attention shifted to Harlow. Reverend Ezekiel Harlow, you've led us on quite a chase across 3 territories. I've established a settlement for those seeking justice, and opportunity denied them elsewhere, Harlow corrected calmly. If that constitutes a crime, the law has changed considerably. Armed insurrection is the charge, Danforth stated. Curious to find you in such company, Reynolds, given the history between you. History changes when truth enters the equation, Bill replied, as you may discover yourself, Colonel. Bill gestured toward the black iron box. That contains my confession regarding the 14th Regiment incident and a list of every officer who participated in the cover-up, including your name, Colonel. Danforth's composure slipped momentarily. Ancient history. Not irrelevant, Cooper interjected, producing Blackwood's signed testimony. This details how officials named in that list have continued to abuse their positions, how they employed Blackwood to eliminate independent settlements like Golden Creek. We have both truth and leverage, Colonel, Harlow stated calmly. The question is whether you serve justice or merely power. For a tense moment, it seemed conflict was inevitable. Then Whitcomb, the governor's representative, urged his horse forward from the militia ranks. The governor has reviewed the evidence, he announced. He's ordered a full investigation into the conspiracy allegations. Until it's complete, both communities are to remain undisturbed under territorial protection. Danforth's face darkened with poorly concealed fury, but with 200 witnesses, he had little choice but to comply. Very well, but this isn't over. No, Harlow agreed. It's just beginning. The reckoning we've all avoided for too long. As the militia established a perimeter around both communities, Bill turned to Harlow. 20 years ago, I chose silence over truth. It was the most costly mistake of my life. And I chose vengeance over healing, Harlow acknowledged, perhaps equally costly. Together they watched as members of both communities Golden Creek and Prophet's Canyon began tentatively mingling, sharing stories, resources, possibilities. Children from different backgrounds played together while adults discussed rebuilding plans. Sarah joined them, her face reflecting cautious hope. Golden Creek won't be the same. No, Bill agreed. It will be better, built on truth this time, not silence. Truth and reconciliation, Harlow added. The most revolutionary act of all. As sunset painted the canyon walls with golden light, a makeshift memorial service was held for those lost in the conflict. Bill placed a hand-carved marker bearing the names of Isaiah Washington and other victims, both from Golden Creek and from the 14th Regiment 20 years before. The past doesn't die, he said to those gathered. It just waits for us to make better choices. Children from both communities stepped forward, placing wildflowers on the markers. Among them, a young boy, only 12, the same age as the child killed by a stray bullet during the siege, read from a journal rescued from Golden Creek. Then in English, "The past doesn't die. It just waits for us to do better." As the words echoed across the canyon, Bill Reynolds stood tall, despite his wound. Sarah at his side, finally free of the burden he had carried for 20 years. Before him stretched a future uncertain but full of possibility, a second chance built not on escape, but on the hardest and most necessary act of courage, facing the truth. They say every Western town is built twice, once by the hands of its founders, and again after fire, flood, or violence has tested its worth. But some foundations run deeper than wood and stone. Some communities are held together by something stronger than shared land or mutual profit. Bill Reynolds carried silence like a stone for 20 years, believing it would protect what he loved. Ezekiel Harlow nursed righteous anger for just as long, believing it would deliver justice. Both men discovered in the end that truth was the only currency valuable enough to purchase redemption. The children of Golden Creek and Prophet's Canyon now play together on common ground, descendants of Union and Confederate freedmen and immigrants, learning history not to divide them, but to guide them towards something better. Their small fires illuminate faces that will write the next chapter of this frontier story. Perhaps that's the greatest legacy of all, not the gold pulled from mountain streams, but the understanding that our deepest wounds can only heal when exposed to light. And that sometimes the most courageous act isn't drawing your weapon, but laying it down.